Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Today we're going to talk about Tesla versus Lucid, CCIV, and maybe some of the other competitors. And y'all know I love talking about both Tesla and CCIV and investing in them, but I am not an engineer. So what we have today is Ricky from 2-Bit Da Vinci, a YouTube channel. Was so grateful. I'm so grateful to have him on to help explain some engineering perspective behind maybe the differences between Tesla and Lucid. Is one going to be more competitive than the other? Is this going to be number one and two? And so Ricky has a background in mechanical engineering from Berkeley, which is a school I almost went to. I decided to go to UCLA instead, but I know nothing about mechanical engineering, and I want to hear all about this. So Ricky, welcome aboard. Tell us about what you know. I got to pick your brain apart here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this all week. Kevin, thank you so much for having me. Absolute honor. I'm a fan. I was watching your interview with Voyager CEO just before this, so thank you for having me and for all you do. Yeah, I'm Ricky. I run a YouTube channel called 2-Bit Da Vinci. We talk about like EV, sustainability, solar panels, and also the investing part of it. Like I believe my tagline is like invest in the future you want to see, and kind of put your money where your mouth is, right? So yeah, that's kind of what we try to do. And so any of your viewers who are interested in that, you can check that out. But first of all, I think it'll be a fun day. We'll talk about a lot of stuff. Your title is Tesla versus Lucid. And I think, can we just start there really quickly? This is kind of the way a lot of people phrase this. And I've never been a fan of that. I actually think they're on the same side, really. And the reason I say it is because I was just reading an article about the Ford Mach-E eating into the Tesla Model Y sales. And it's like, okay, well, if every car was a Tesla and Mach-E sales are 2, that's a decline in market share, right? But the way to look at this really is that the electric vehicle total addressable market is growing. And so like Tesla's not selling less in terms of Model Ys now that there's Ford Mach-E. It's the opposite. They're coming off the line and they're sold. Like there aren't any sitting around. So the market is growing. And so as we get more and more entrants, what will happen is there will be more EV shoppers. I'll give you an example. I was talking with somebody who leases a new AMG Mercedes S-Class or E-Class every 3 years. So in 3 years, he'll get the next one. Common, like a lot of these, executives and stuff. So he doesn't like Tesla for whatever reason, okay? So let's say the Lucid Air comes out, Dream Edition, 1,000 horsepower and all this stuff, and it looks good and he loves it, and he buys one. Well, in 3 years, he might be a future Tesla buyer, right? Because you've now converted the guy who was non-EV into the world of EV. So the way to think about this is for me, my 3 favorite companies are Lucid, Tesla, huge Tesla fan, and Rivian. We need those 3 to succeed. And yeah, because Rivian's, the R1S is like the little electric Range Rover, right? I don't know if you're a Range Rover fan. I've always loved them. I don't buy them because I don't think they're especially reliable to keep long-term, but an electric Range Rover. So that's what Rivian's doing with the pickup truck and stuff. So as we get more people looking at EVs, Tesla wins, everybody wins. Like, because we're going to have the people that are going to hurt are the people that make gas cars.
So, that's fascinating because it's kind of what NIO says in China. NIO has this argument of, hey, look, we're competing with Tesla, not against Tesla. And I guess maybe you could speak to the engineering part of that, because I hear, as more of a business and political degree, I hear competition and I think bad. But maybe as an engineer, you see competition, you see, no, this is good because it increases profit and efficiency at maybe the battery suppliers, or how about the graphite miners and all this? Maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the bullets that I wanted to bring up is what we call the first mover's advantage. Tesla has the first mover's advantage. How is that valuable? Well, they're now maybe a $500 billion company in the last couple of weeks, but they were up to $800 billion, right? Yeah. We'll talk about that. But Tesla is synonymous with electric cars. And there are people who aren't looking to buy an electric car. They want to buy a Tesla. Like if you give them, hey, here's a Bolt, huh? What do you think? They'd be like, no, thank you. I want the Tesla, right? They've done a good job of being desirable, but that's come at like great cost as well. They've had to build their own supercharger network, which is not cheap. Each station, depending on the number of stalls, could cost between $100,000 and $600,000 per station. So now Tesla's doing all that work. When they started, there wasn't even enough batteries to make a Model 3. So they have to build a gigafactory, which is billions of dollars of CapEx, right? So those are the struggles of being the first mover. Now you've got like Rivian and Lucid and some of the other guys who benefit from being the second mover. You get to sit back and see that Tesla did, they laid the foundation and they laid the road, and now you're like, cool, now there's a paved road and we can actually take it. So when that happens though, Tesla will benefit as well, because if LG Chem is working on a big battery plant in Indonesia, working with the government there for some good contracts and tax breaks and incentives, because there's a lot of the raw materials are there. So that new plant is a function of all these Tesla sales. So now if Rivian is selling, 100,000 trucks and SUVs, and Lucid selling 100,000 of these luxury sedans, companies will pop up. To your point about lithium mining or nickel or some of these other, rare earth metals, we're going to have more supply. We're going to have more companies doing it. And when that happens, prices will continue to drop. It won't just be because Tesla's making cells. It'll be because the cell production around the world just continues to rise. The other thing too is charging infrastructure. If we currently just have Teslas and there's the supercharger network, there's not that much motivation for, if you're Electrify America or Blink, to build chargers, right? You're kind of getting ahead of the game. But when we have more EVs, that's going to be a profitable place to be.
It seems like at some point Tesla needs to probably assimilate, or somebody needs to like standardize the connectors between everything. Is that, you think, in the future?
This is another, I think, challenge that they've had being first mover, is they had that proprietary port when the rest of the world, I drove a Mach-E recently, the Bolt, the Lucid Air, they all have like a CCS standard. That's kind of like your USB-C versus Tesla's Lightning, like what Apple does, right? There's actually a lot of comparisons I think we could make between Apple and Tesla. I do think so. And even if they don't, what makes me really irritated is they don't sell a CCS adapter in North America. It's like, it's an adapter, like make it and sell it, because what if there's a Electrify America or a charge point charger really close to my house, way closer than there is a supercharger? I can't even use it because I literally cannot plug it into it. So when there's going to come a point where they do have to do that. And also in the EU, it might be because of like regulatory pressures that they do that. But yeah, I agree. They need to standardize.
And I want to clarify, you had mentioned you had taken a look at some of these different vehicles. You haven't driven the Lucid yet, right?
I have not.
Okay. So you've seen it. I do want to talk on these differences, because, Lucid, they sell themselves as, public or going public or merging here with the public company CCIV, in case anybody's wondering. Lucid really sells its technology vision and suggests that their motor's more efficient, that they can get to 500 miles of range because they, with 113 kilowatt hour battery pack, because their systems are so much more efficient, and they've got this 900 volt architecture. What's going on here? Like, can we break this all down? Because there's a lot going on that they talk about.
Yeah, exactly. The first thing I guess we can start with is, if you do the math on kind of how efficient you have to be, like in the gas car world, we talk about miles per gallon. We can talk about like miles per kilowatt hour. So Lucid's claim puts them around like 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is in line with like a long range Model 3. So first of all, it's not crazy or out of the realm of possibility. That was what I kind of argued with Warren when we debated on his show last week, which is, yeah, 500 miles sounds really crazy when like my car has 300 miles of range, but I have a smaller battery pack. They do have more batteries, and they've also made it more efficient. So we talked about before we started this call, I have a checklist of things that I want to see if a company is doing to, if it does it all kind of line up. So the first thing is they really care about like subsystems. Every light, bulb, every system and pump and motor, valve, everything in that car is taking away from your range, right? So traditional cars have like either halogen bulbs or HID bulbs. Really efficient cars like my Tesla, all Teslas, Lucid's Dream, they have LED lighting, and there's even like laser lighting, which is another cool new tech. But the point is, really good, well-focused light with way less energy draw. So if you take that approach to all these different things, that's the first way you get more efficiency. You're not wasting it for things like lighting. The second thing is that architecture, the pack architecture. So if we break that down a little bit, what Lucid is doing is they have a 900, and I think it's even like 924. I'm thinking it might be you mentioned the 113 kilowatt hour battery pack. It might be some random number that gets them to 924, but let's call it a 900 volt architecture. Okay. To do that, what that really means is that they're putting less like battery cells. They use the same cylindrical cells as the Model 3 and Y, the 2170 from LG Chem. And they're putting less of these into parallel, which means like, the negative and positives together, which results in the same voltage, but a higher current. And then they're taking more bricks. Let me try to simplify this a little bit by saying, let's say you have 100 batteries and you're trying to make a battery pack.
Yeah.
Company one takes 10 of those batteries and ties them all into parallel, which means if a lithium-ion battery has a 4-volt differential potential, then that brick of 10 has 4 volts. And then you'd have 10 of those, so 40 volts in total. What Lucid is doing is saying, we're going to put only 5 in parallel. As a result, have 20 bricks and have twice the system voltage. The challenge, though, there's a lot of challenges. For one, the BMS has twice as much work to do. In a brick, when you have like 5 or 10 batteries in parallel, they'll naturally normalize. Like the voltage will all kind of be regulated. It's kind of like you can't have hot air and cold air in a room. It's going to kind of mix and reach equilibrium. But between packs, they can be different. So if the voltage in one pack is already really high and the rest were low, and you go to charge it and you overcharge that one brick of cells, you could cause fires and other problems, degradation. So the BMS's job is to track all those different packs. So like in a voltage, in the case of Lucid with a 900 volt architecture, you got twice as many bricks of cells to monitor as you would on a lower pack voltage system. So there's challenges there. Also, it's more expensive to build inverters at higher voltages. A good analogy probably is solar. So when you build solar inverters to convert that DC from solar to AC for your house, higher voltage inverters do work better. They're more efficient, which is, again, the benefit. But the problem is they are more expensive to build. So this is where Lucid invested in that Wonder Box. Like they've got this totally built in-house, because going off the shelf maybe wasn't even possible. I'm not sure, but they built it all in-house so they can control cost and be able to manufacture this in some meaningful way at cost. So pros and cons: expensive, more challenging, but the benefit is it's way more efficient. The reason why, one of the main reasons why, is if you have double the voltage, you don't need as much current. So kind of think like the pipe analogy you've probably heard. But if you have higher voltage, you have less current, which means less heat is formed in the pipe or in the copper windings and stuff. So that's how their motors are a little bit smaller and still really efficient and put out tons of power. Like they're really proud of how small and compact that motor assembly is. And one of the main reasons why is they're able to run on that higher 900 volt architecture.
Okay, so the 900 volt architecture is really a symptom of how they're organizing the batteries, and that puts some more strain on these battery management systems, but it comes at the benefit of more efficiency. So it's harder, but there's more efficiency. What's and maybe these are things confuse me here. I hear about going to a 48 volt system, but then I hear Tesla's, like, how is that different from this 900? Are those just totally different systems?
Yeah, so there's low voltage systems in your car. Like if you have an older car, you have a 12 volt like lead acid battery, that big heavy thing you got to change every couple of years. Yep. And what's funny is my 75 kilowatt hour battery pack Tesla with like cutting edge batteries has one of those. I have one of those batteries. So Tesla is foregoing the 12 volt system and going for a 48 volt system. That's like consider that the low voltage system.
Oh, so that's for like the TVs or the monitors and all the like the autonomy or whatever. That's going from 12 to 48. And then the 900 is in reference to the battery packs, or Tesla's maybe at 400 the way they've set up their battery packs. Lucid's going to this 912 or whatever voltage. And Lucid is doing that because they're trying to be more efficient, and because of that, they're able to downsize their motors and be more heat efficient or something. I mean, that sounds good. Like, why doesn't Tesla do that?
I actually think they will. They haven't made this official, so this is pure speculation. Like if you have a little banner at the bottom, I think the Cybertruck, the Roadster, and the Plaid Plus Model S, the stuff that's going to use their 4680 cells that they're building, is going to move to a higher system voltage. Is my prediction. But again, they've had the baggage of, they've been doing this for a while. So their plants and their facilities are built for this older stuff, right? Whereas Lucid or some of the newer guys, they weren't tied to that. They were able to jump right to a higher system voltage. The Ioniq 5 is going to have an 800 volt system. The Porsche Taycan, 800 volt. All new cars are going to have this higher voltage system. And in the case of Lucid, what they do is kind of like your house. Your house here in the US, we have 110 volt AC coming in, but you have two different lines, right? The 240 combines the two. Well,
Sure.
in Lucid's case, they have like a 400-volt rail and then a 800 or 900-volt rail. So some systems, if they run better around 400, you could grab that, or you could put them to series and get the full 900-volt. So there's tons of little games and tricks. But like you said, computers, for example, they don't need 400-volt. They want the
Sure.
opposite. They probably need like well over 24. So different things need
Interesting.
different
Okay.
levels. Yeah.
So really, this is being done for efficiency purposes, and you think Tesla might end up going in that direction. But Lucid, I mean, how do we know that Lucid's actually got this tech? I mean, like it all sounds good on paper, but shouldn't it make some of us nervous in investing in the idea, especially after like a Nikola?
Yeah, that's that's a comparison that I hear a lot. So first of all, we do need to see it. Like, I'd love to, like, if Lucid is watching this, like, call me and Kevin and let us drive the thing and kind of talk about our findings and stuff. So we do need to see it, and I think that is a fair assessment. To the example of Nikola really bugs me because I think they did such an injustice to the entire EV space. What they did is they kind of hurt public trust.
Yeah.
But I'll give you some highlights difference between the two companies. Nikola was working on like 10 things, right? They had like a battery jet ski and a hydrogen semi. And Trevor Milton was coming out talking about how he had this radical new battery and he'd radicalized how you can make hydrogen, all stuff that didn't make sense. It's like, if what you're saying is true, you're going to be a trillionaire. Like, there's, it just didn't make any sense, right? And also, they only had 300 employees even now. So 10 projects that you're building with 300 employees. And so that means what, maybe 100 engineers? You're building all of this with 100 engineers. It just didn't make sense. I think the signs were kind of there. In the case of Lucid, they're building one thing, the Air. There's they're going to build an SUV later, but it'll be kind of like the 3 and the Y where they share a platform and stuff. But they have 2,000 employees and they're building one product.
Wow.
They have a factory now. We're close, by the way. I should be getting a invitation. I kept emailing them. I want to see your factory. And I think they're going to give me a factory tour in the next couple of weeks or so. So I'll make a video about it. But I want to see that. You're totally right. As far as what we've seen, we haven't seen everything yet, but I'm hoping that slowly does reveal itself. It's a lot the same thing with Tesla too. Like, we haven't seen the Plaid Plus. We don't really.
True.
When they showed us the Roadster all those years ago, I don't even think it was possible because it requires the 4680 cell, which came like 2 years later, right? But I think that's all okay because I trust that they'll do it.
Yeah, and with Tesla, I know we had a lot of the doubters up front as well. And so really, your thinking is, hey, look, we've got this factory, we got 2,000 employees. Nikola only had 300, and they're going in every direction, and they're trying to revolutionize batteries at the same time as hydrogen. Lucid just saying, look, we're just here to provide a more efficient car, just one car right now, the Lucid Air. And then eventually we'll go and do, I think they've got 4 versions of this in different prices, all the way down to like $70,000 or whatever. That'll come out in time. I mean, but I guess the big struggle I have is, why would you buy a Lucid? Why not just buy a Tesla?
So, do you have a Tesla, by the way? I don't think I asked you that.
I have an X, 2017 X.
So I'll turn this around and ask you, would you get a Dream Edition Lucid?
I mean, I want to drive it, if I was blown away, I'd consider it, I because certainly as I hate buying cars. I buy I bought the X solely because of the autonomy. It was like, cool, I can drive. That's actually one of the concerns I have with the Lucid. Like, if I get in a Lucid and it's like, oh, cool, this is awesome, everything's cool about it, it's got a longer range than this, but then it's like, oh yeah, then the self-driving or whatever, even just self-driving on a highway, which obviously the Tesla has now, that's not going to be available for another year. I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah, I'm with you on that front. The FSD, I think we should probably talk about like all by itself later, a little bit later on. And I'm with you on that for sure. After having a Tesla and not having to drive like on the 5 up north,
right?
Northern California, I'm not going back to not having that. There's no way.
Yes.
So I'll say, first of all, I love the idea of 500 miles of range. In this pandemic, we actually put 17,000 miles on my Tesla during a pandemic. And the reason why is my family's in the Bay Area. So San Diego to the BayArea, about 1,000 miles round trip. And we did it a lot just to keep my kids sane and, go to my mom and dad's farm and see the chickens and bunnies and stuff. So there's that interest. Also, I think it's a gorgeous car. For whatever reason, I've always loved the look of the Air. Just especially the front and the side profile. It has this cool like double bubble window detail, like on the C pillar near the back. I just think it's a cool look. Um, I'm not gonna lie, the two cars I would like die to have right now would be a Plaid Plus Model S or the Lucid Air, both in the 500-mile ranges for this reason, as a kind of an ultimate road tripper. So
So
why
you would
should
actually potentially take the Lucid over the Plaid. I'm going to pull up a picture of it here really quick so people can see it. But you would potentially take that over, huh?
I would, and it's hard to say. And to be honest with you, that's why I'm almost I feel crazy saying it. But yeah, I think I would. Again, subjective, right? The design is subjective to how you feel about it. But I love that car, and I want a world where that car is out in the roads, and that's an option. I'm not gonna lie though, I'd love to have a Model S Plaid Plus as well. Either of those would be great. But competition is just kind of generally a good thing. You know, I was making this joke with my wife earlier. Where I live, Teslas are as common as can be. No one even looks at me. I blend in. I'm like a ghost in my Model 3, especially because mine's white.
Yeah.
I drove the Mach-E, the Ford Mach-E in red a week ago, and everywhere I was going like In-N-Out Burger or like a Starbucks. People were like rolling out their windows and be like, "Hey, cool car," and like pointing, like looking and talking to us and taking pictures and stuff. That just doesn't happen in my Tesla because I mean everybody has a Tesla, right? Especially like if you live in the Bay Area or LA or San Diego, they're just really common. So my thought is, yeah, it's the Mach-E. You see it?
Yeah, I do.
It's a gorgeous car. I think it's a fantastic.
That's nice.
I think it might be the best like
Why don't
legacy
you buy
car
that?
EV. It doesn't have. So my wife prefers the Y because it has a third row option, which the Mach-E doesn't have. But looks wise, yeah, I think it's a good looking car for sure.
Yeah.
But just having more options, I think, is a good thing. You can't have a world where you have one car Tesla who make 4 models in 5 colors. Like that's no good. We need to have a wide variety of options. I think it's kind of the way to look at it.
Okay. So you see Lucid as really maybe providing that alternative to maybe that Mercedes buyer or that BMW buyer, and as a result, hey, Lucid and Tesla could coexist. You know, if you don't want the S, fine. Here's an alternative for you. Here's another sedan that you could buy, a luxury sedan. Because who else really is providing luxury fully electric sedans right now?
We've seen all kinds of goofy concept cars, but like honestly, like on the brink of production, yeah, there's nobody else right now.
So in a year from now, it's just going to be, you want a luxury sedan that's all electric and hopefully self-driving, which we'll get into. You're stuck with either Tesla or the Lucid in a year from now.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. And for the last 10 years, it hasn't even been that. It's been, are you getting the Model S or the 3 or the, you know, right. It's just been one company, and we should give them credit.
I have been wondering, why would somebody buy a Model S when you could just buy the 3? Like, why would I spend all that extra money?
So this gets to, I think, just the kind of individual that you are and how much money you make and your status in society, right? There are people I know who drive the S or the X because it's just a little more premium. They feel like they're in a more premium segment. There's nothing wrong with that. There's people who buy Mercedes and BMWs, right? You could just buy a Ford Fiesta and get around very economically, but you could get a Mercedes S-Class. So I think part of it is the status symbol, right? And you probably know people like this, but I know a lot of people who used to be Audi drivers or BMW guys who now are all about Tesla because they're just even cooler than their old cars used to be.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good point. That's true. Okay. So, and you think Lucid could be that alternative? I've called it sort of the potential Neo of America, because we don't really have a, maybe in the future we'll actually have literally Neo in America. But right now, you go to China, you can pick, well, what do you want? You want the Tesla, the Neo, the Xpeng, BYD's got like dozens of these electric cars. I don't think they get much credit. But, out here, it seems like you got Tesla or the Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. There's a new Bolt, by the way. It's far improved. It's a little bigger and stuff. I don't know if you've seen that one. You can take a look. But the new Bolt EUV is kind of cool. But I think it suffers from the same problem, which is it's not as desirable. People are passionate about getting that Tesla. They want to get the Model Y or the 3 because they're so excited about it. The Bolt, to me, feels more of a practical choice. But it's a solid car, and it's really well built. And I'm hoping that GM takes a page from the Ford playbook and builds more desirable EVs. because that's what Ford has done with the Mach-E, especially, is they've done a good job of building. Yeah, so there's the that's a new front, right? I don't know if you remember the old one, but it's been
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, it is. So we don't. Yeah, you're right. We don't have that Xpeng. Xpeng has some really cool stuff they're showing off. Neo as well. A lot of Tesla owners aren't going to like Neo because all the allegations of stealing some of Tesla's tech from a couple years ago. But we do need that other boost. And the way I look at this too is what's different about Lucid or Rivian building a new car versus General Motors with the Bolt is with a new startup, you have the opportunity to have kind of a fresh piece of paper design, meaning there's no legacy baggage. You're not trying to save money by using whatever you can because of what you used to do. You're just kind of go, here's my vision of what the most amazing, cool SUV, like the Rivian R1S, which might be my favorite EV right now. Whereas if you're GM or somebody else, you're trying to think, you're kind of limiting yourself to how you've thought in the past a little bit, right? So that's why I think people think, oh, when General Motors and VW switches their minds to go in EV, Tesla's toast. Like, no, that's probably not going to be the case, because by then it's probably going to be pretty late in the game. And at this point with Tesla, it probably is. They're not going to probably catch them. But I do want to see
too
more
much baggage. Too much baggage holding them back with their legacy systems, their factories, maybe all their employees. Like, how do you convert an ICE manufacturing factory into an EV manufacturing factory? You're almost completely different worlds, huh?
Yeah, and it's not cheap. And you have to make those judgment calls and tell your shareholders, hey, remember that Chevy Trax we sold 1 million of? Well, we're going to stop selling as many of those to try to do this new thing. And it's just tough. And sometimes it's literally baggage like pension obligations or other things that are just tying you down that a new company doesn't have to deal with.
Got it. So what about Apple? I mean, we keep hearing rumors that Apple's going to come out with something. I interviewed Sandy Munro, and he kind of dropped a little bit of a bomb that maybe he's in a contract with them, and he does advisory services for manufacturing or the manufacturing of electric vehicles. It seems like a pretty good tell that at least Apple's doing their DD, their due diligence. Are they just too far out?
The thing though with Apple is they're not much of a manufacturing company. If you look at the back of your MacBook or your phone, it says designed in California. They say that because it's not made in California. And in fact, they don't even own the factories. And this is kind of it's a business decision, but Foxconn builds their phones. So Apple, the phone that you're holding was not manufactured in some Apple plant. In fact, there's no such thing. Apple does this really to get around any kind of laws of like labor laws or any other issues. They're like, this is a third. Apple's very slick how they operate. They don't bring this up very much, and they don't want you thinking about it. But they're a very smooth customer in terms of how they operate. So for me though, the problem with that is I think they have good industrial design for small consumer products, but like an engineering design for a car is just a different beast. So they would have to go to the drawing board of recruiting from all these other car companies, go getting Tesla engineers and Rivian engineers. So I don't feel like they have much in the way of an advantage in any way. So typically you want to enter a market where you have an advantage.
Sure.
Apple's really good at this. They don't make printers. They don't make refrigerators, right? They build stuff they know they can, with minimal CapEx, they can get tons of return on investment. An iPad is a bigger iPhone. A MacBook now runs the same operating system. They're building their same chips that are all ARM. So they're smart in that regard. So I don't see any market advantage. I think what might make more sense would be maybe to, offer like self-driving, machine learning kinds of services as a
software.
Software.
Bring the, what is it called? CarPlay. Just expand on CarPlay, and hey, you want to put CarPlay in the Chevy, the Ford, the Toyota, the whatever, here you go.
Yeah, they're doing that already. It might even be more than that. Now it might be like, hey, and those cameras that we put in, we'll send those to our servers and do the machine learning and build this self-driving car. And all you need to do is go update. Like we'll go, hey, new version, hit update. Okay. And you'll get all of it for free. That's pretty compelling, especially if you're chasing Tesla, who is way far ahead in that regard. We'll talk about that. So, I think that should be fun.
Is it possible that maybe Lucid could partner with Apple and just go, look, we got the engineering, we got the motor, we got the 900 volts. Apple, just hook us up with you.
Yeah, I think before the SPAC, I had thought about that. I'm not gonna lie, if I was Tim Cook, I would have bought Lucid and turned it around, put an Apple logo on the front. Because if you look at the Lucid Air, to me, it looks like an Apple product. That's maybe the best compliment you can give it. It's
Wow.
stunning. It's a kind of a thing Apple would make.
Yeah.
Now, though, that they're going public, I mean, it's still not impossible. The timing of it all seems a little bit weird. But yeah, maybe we did hear rumors that they were potentially going to partner with Apple for some of the software stuff. Now I think it's Amazon that people are talking about. You follow this probably a little
Oh,
more than I do.
well, and now I actually have not heard these Amazon rumors. There are Amazon rumors now too?
Yeah, people were thinking it might be Apple that they're partnering with, but Amazon, talk about like AWS and the cloud compute business. No one does it better. I mean, pretty much the whole world runs on Amazon. So
Wow.
Amazon might be a good partner, especially if they get into this business and say, you car companies, you build the cars, put our gear in there, we'll take care of the rest. That's how you beat Tesla to full self-driving, because now Tesla might have 1 million cars on the road, but if you partner with someone like Amazon, who, I mean, talk about engineering might over there on Amazon, they could, and what you really need is that data to feed your models. So if they have tons of models of car out there, that could make sense for Lucid. And I will
Yeah,
say
because
quickly,
go ahead.
now I was going to say quickly to your point about like the focus and what Lucid is doing. Peter Rawlinson, in an interview, he mentioned that he's a little bullish on FSD, and he's not investing as much of his team. He's focusing on the EV part. Let's be masters of making the best inverters and drivetrains and motors. And he's going to be partnering with somebody. I don't know if they've mentioned who, but they're going to partner with somebody for some of the full self-driving stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you could just put in a Mobileye. Qualcomm's got this, Nvidia's got this. What, like, the options are out there. I mean, that's after all what Neo did, right? I mean, Neo doesn't even manufacture their own cars. Neo manufactures their car at a partnership or at I forgot. Who is it? It doesn't matter who it is right now. I forgot. But they're half owned by the Chinese government and half owned by Volkswagen. They're not manufacturing their cars. They're not manufacturing their own batteries. And they're not doing their own autonomy. Maybe in the future they might. So really, you've got Lucid here. They will be manufacturing their own cars, but they could just as easily plug in some autonomy like Neo did, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's really Apple and Android, if you think about it, right? Apple went down the road of doing everything themselves, and everybody else uses Android. But the thing is, 9 or 8 out of 10 phones in the world are Android. So there's a lot of power in that volume. And it's kind of the same sort of a thing. Do you do it all yourself, or do you partner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Lucid, I mean, don't you think they should have announced something about self-driving already? Like, why would you SPAC and not mention in your 70+ page investor presentation something about full self-driving? Like, it seems like honestly, I mean, kind of an idiotic PR move. For like, what am I missing here? Do they just not have anything yet? Have they just not even thought about how important this is? To me, I don't care about electric cars. I care about self-driving.
You're not alone. You're not alone on that. I think you're right. I think they're probably a little bit behind. If I had to guess, I think they're focusing on getting this car like engineering complete and then ready for manufacturing, which is another animal. Remember the Model 3 ramp up? It's a crazy thing trying to build cars. It really is. So I think they've been focusing on that. And I think in terms of their self-driving, they're starting to say like, maybe we should partner with somebody else and try to take a new approach at this. So I think maybe there might be news about this later on, but clearly I think if I had to guess, I'd say they're probably a little behind on that front. But if you partner with the right people, that might not be as bad as it seems right now.
Doesn't that create issues though? Because I mean, look at Tesla. So Tesla's got, their 8 cameras or whatever they have, but it's on their models. Like the cameras and the data is associated with those models. If you start plugging in, a Mobileye, you're putting a software stack on to all these different hardwares. Oh, well, now it's supposed to work on a Camry. Now it's supposed to work on the Lucid Air. Now it's supposed to work on. Isn't that just going to create issues, or does it not matter so much? Does the dimensions of the cars and exactly where the cameras are, does that not matter as much?
That is such a good question, and very few people ask that question. Again, I'm going to go back to Apple and Android. I'm an iOS developer. I write apps for iPhone. And we always kind of make fun of the Android guys because for our jobs are easy. There's like 4 models of phone and size. So for us to build an app, it's really easy. Whereas on Android, you got to build it not knowing this could be like a 2-inch thing or like a 100-inch refrigerator door. Who knows? We have no clue because that's run on everything. So the challenges are greater. But really it comes down to building the right kind of like APIs and understanding like what is the inputs that are needed. You make a good point. Like maybe the Chevy Bolt has a wider focal length camera. You have to know
Right.
that because the focal length of the camera is what determines like how far in the distance, how far that actually is. How high is it from the ground? On different cars, it'll be different. So I think what will be required is a validation process. Like if you're working with us and we're Mobileye, your car, we need to know the sensor height of each sensor. We need to know the focal length of the camera, the megapixels. We need to know like the frame rate that it's recording at. And so I think it's kind of like Android. Android, if you want to partner with Android, they have like a more premier model where you have to follow rules. Like here's the specs you need to have. If you don't meet these specs, you can't license our software. So I think it's a harder problem and it's not as clean cut as it is on Tesla, but it's doable.
Okay. But I mean, then on the flip side, Tesla's got the miles driven. I mean, if an Apple comes in, first of all, why would somebody use Apple? How many miles do they have driven? They don't have a car. I mean, maybe they got some betas out there, but like how many engineers can you hire to drive around? Meanwhile, Tesla's, in billions of miles driven. I mean, Waymo's not even close to that. So isn't that a huge disadvantage for anybody who might partner with Lucid and then thereby a disadvantage for Lucid?
Yeah. So right now today, I'll say if I were to buy a Model S Plaid Plus instead of a Lucid, it'd be for two reasons. Right now, the supercharger network, which is a huge advantage for Tesla. And two, it's the full self-driving advantage that Tesla has, right? But what's interesting is on both of those fronts, the future might not look exactly like it does today. You're right about Tesla has billions of miles driven in terms of like the amount of data, just sheer data that they have, and they continue to get every minute with every new driver on the road today is vast. But you partner with someone like Apple or Microsoft has an Azure driving solution as well that they're selling as a service. If you get one of these big time players and you partner with a lot of car companies, the data advantage can switch like within a year, honestly. If they sign the right deals and say, hey, the next generation Chevy Bolt and the next generation Mach-E is going to be sending data to Microsoft's cloud Azure service that they're going to be developing, that advantage in data can change quickly. And by the way, it doesn't have to just be EVs. We always think about EVs and full self-driving, but ICE cars can have full self-driving too. So imagine if some car manufacturer comes out and says, we're partnering with blank to run all of our cars on this new platform. So that advantage can shift kind of the same way Apple dominated sales early on, but eventually when hundreds of companies are working with Android, they're going to have their own saturation.
That's fascinating. I didn't even think about a couple things that you said here. I mean, look, what does Tesla have on the road? A few million cars or whatever. I mean, relative to like a Volkswagen that I think is selling like 9 million cars a year.
Right.
Imagine if you had essentially what you're saying here, even a partnership between, let's just make it up here, Apple and Lucid, Volkswagen and Toyota. All of a sudden, in the span of a year, you could probably have 10, 20x the amount of cars out there collecting data than Tesla has. And it could really happen like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned Mobileye. Mobileye on their website, if you go to their website, it says we're in over 300 models of car and we're on more than 1 million vehicles today. But what's not clear to me is, okay, well, are you taking that data and sending it to a computer, a cloud source that is then training machine models? Are you doing what Tesla's doing? That stuff wasn't really clear. And that's where, to your point about like, what do we really know? I want to know more. I'd love to know more about Mobileye and how they work. Or you mentioned NVIDIA or some of these other players that are offering services like this. Yeah, so if you scroll down a little, you'll see there's a little section where they talk about, look at that, 60 million vehicles worldwide. So this is maybe their sensor tech, but does that also include taking data and sending it over like an LTE connection to some sort of a cloud compute cluster? That's the part that maybe is a little bit less clear.
Right. And now Chevy Cruise does something like this as well, because GM bought Cruise. I think they had like 2,000 employees. Now they got like 30,000 employees. What's your take on them? Do they have a chance? Do they have a shot? I mean, they've got a pretty big valuation inside of GM now as well. Is potentially, does GM have a shot here in the fact that they now have this basically a potential Mobileye competitor inside their actual company?
So yeah, I drove the new Bolt in LA a couple of weeks ago, and they had the Bolt EUV will be the first affordable Chevy with Super Cruise, which is their autopilot pretty much. and it works very much like autopilot. The main difference I noticed was there's a camera right above the steering wheel, and what it does is it is watching your face. So like while I was making a video, I was trying to do a review. So I was like, oh, look over here. And when my eyes like diverted away from the camera, it would start blinking. But if you just look at the road like you're supposed to and you're in the right position, the car drove for like 30 minutes with no intervention at all. So the Super Cruise tech is pretty impressive, but it's way behind where Tesla is in terms of like the beta you've probably been seeing, where a car will take you from your driveway to Krispy Kreme donuts and back.
That's nuts. Yeah.
I think that is a topic of like further investigation. They're pretty mum about it as well. And the mistake they've made, I think, is making this feature exclusive. They're trying to make Super Cruise like this luxury feature. That's the stupid move. Like there's a reason why every Tesla has all the cameras and all the sensors you need no matter what. Whether you buy it or not, they want you to have it, because even if you don't have full self-driving, Tesla's watching your road. They have that shadow drive mode. They're projecting like, hey, here's what the computer should do. Well, Ricky did something different. Send that to Tesla and figure out what happened. So you're a part of this grand data aggregation experiment, whether or not you want to spend more money or not. So first step for GM, put this tech everywhere. Every car in 2020 something should have it, because you need the number of cars on the road to have any kind of a shot. You can't make this exclusive to the Cadillac Escalade and that just doesn't make any sense. Like make this common.
What is the shadow drive mode?
So I mean, part of how Tesla does what they do is they build this model to predict, right? Because self-driving is not deterministic. And what I mean by that is you can't build, as a software engineer, I'm not going to write like if else, like I'm not going to write code to handle self-driving. What I have to do is build a model that will properly predict what to do. Because there's some crazy guy with a ladder on his pickup truck that comes flying off, or a bed, or some crazy thing, right? You can't predict all of it. So what Tesla's doing is they have this model that says, okay, the intent here is he's going to this location. What would you do, computer? And as long as what I'm doing and the computer is doing is an agreement, no problem. But the minute there's some weird thing and I yank the wheel and I hard left and change lanes, Tesla's computer says, that's not what I was going to do. What's going on? And they're able to then take that and figure out, like, why did the human driver take intervention here and you didn't? And they're able to like continually train their model and say, you see, there was something that ran across the road that you didn't pick up in time. And then they'll say, okay, we have a new label. This is a dog. And we didn't know what the dog was and we weren't looking for it, but now we are. And in the future, when we get an over-the-air update, every Tesla can look for dogs and understand how to interact and stuff. That's kind of a rough example, but yeah.
Okay, got it. So really, it's like, is GM just, are they looking at this as too short term here by trying to just upsell this as a feature?
Yeah, there's I think there's some leadership adjustments that need to happen. Like I mentioned about Super Cruise. Don't think of that as a feature. Like Super Cruise is like your door, your entry point into being able to build this tech out. Yeah, I think there's a lack of maybe some leadership in terms of thinking of it that way.
Okay. Somebody here mentions that maybe it might not be cost effective to do full self-driving on internal combustion engine cars. Why?
I think the argument there is end game. And the end game would be, imagine a robo-taxi, your Tesla Model X, the drivetrain and the motor, it could go a million miles without any problems. Your battery pack might be able to go a third of that, like 300,000 miles. So we're talking about a car, the one you have already today, that could do 300,000 miles probably with no maintenance or anything. With a gas car, you're constantly changing the oil and stuff. So that makes it for a very annoying robo-taxi car, right? Imagine if you're doing like hundreds of miles a day and every so many days you have to take it out and go drive it somewhere for an oil change and a spark plug change. Yeah, that's why. So as far as for a robo-taxi, but just for consumers who like to sit in the car like you and not be bothered with driving, that could be useful today, even in an ICE car. So
I am bothered by the idea of Cruise making me look at the road. Should I be? Am I wrong to say? I mean, maybe. I mean, I look at the road, but let me just take the devil's advocate approach here. Let's say I didn't want to look at the road all the time. Isn't it kind of annoying that this thing's beeping at you all the time in Cruise, and isn't that a potentially an issue?
Yeah, I'm with you. I was trying to think which is better, having to like do the little jiggle that I have to do on my Tesla, or having to constantly be looking. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I prefer the Tesla approach as well. But remember, there's a camera on the Model 3s and Ys, and the future X's will have it too. And Tesla might, like for regulatory purposes, not that Tesla would want to, but the lawyers might get involved and say, if you're going to have a FSD claim or anything, you better have a camera that can tell us that the minute the driver is not looking. So I hate to tell you, but that might be a requirement.
I might need to start keeping my plan to keep my 2017 then.
for a little while. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no camera in there. So
can I just address one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I was reading your comment section, Matt. Yeah, your viewers are awesome. They mentioned George Hotz, who's the founder of Open Pilot and Comma AI.
Okay.
So they have this kind of open source self-driving software, and they have this little. They have a sensor pack you can buy that has a camera and a CPU and everything on board to do the full self-driving. And so if you have a compatible car, which are some of the newer models of Hondas and Toyotas and Fords and stuff, you can get on and use it. And he's an incredibly smart dude. And again, it's a pure computer vision solution. And I'm a huge fan of Comma AI. They're in San Diego. I've thought about like reaching out to him and like, I want to come work for you guys for a couple of years, but really cool stuff. You should have him on, George Hotz. He'd be a cool interview. You'd love him.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Geez. I'd be happy to do that. So is that a threat to Tesla, something like that?
They're not selling cars, so you still have to buy a Ford Escape or a Tesla Model X. But then if you bought the car without it, you could add it later. I think it is a threat to Tesla in the way that it'll keep them in check. So I will say, as much as I love Tesla, I have a couple of gripes with them. One of them is whenever they jack up the FSD prices, it pisses me off. It really does. Yeah. And the reason is you're selling a feature that is not even ready today. You cannot use FSD today, so you're making me pay now $10,000 for it. So the only hope consumers have of not paying ludicrous amounts of money like that is competition, right? If Mobileye comes out and every new model of some brand has really great FSD or something, that's when Tesla has to kind of, okay, we can't just charge whatever we want. Basically what I'm saying is eventually it needs to be a commodity, right? Imagine if every car just drives itself. There's no question about it. It's not even a valuable thing. It's like of course you have FSD. That's the future I want to see as fast as possible.
Got it. So what about, isn't Lucid going to have big issues when we start getting to, maybe like a $25,000 Tesla car or maybe even the Cybertruck? Elon's talking about how the Cybertruck is going to be so freaking efficient because it's just, there's no paint, right? You're cutting so much crap out. Like, how do you actually compete with Tesla?
Very, very good question. The reason why I'm very bullish with Lucid is they're doing the Model S car today. That's an easier problem to solve. And the reason why is it's a very high margin car and it's a low volume car. I'm not worried about like battery supply constraint being a problem at that point. When they then go to the Gravity, which is their SUV, also that'll be like when Tesla went to the X. Also, I think that'll be pretty smooth. But you tell me like Lucid in 2025 or something, when they want to try to make the $35,000 car, that is going to be a painful transition unless the world completely like 10x's battery supply production. So I think that will be a challenge when you're trying to make 1 million EVs. That's really hard. Making 40,000 luxury EVs luckily is a lot easier in terms of those constraints with supply chain.
What about some of these other competitors like Fisker? Fisker had a massive rally this week, sold off in the crash the last few days, but there's a lot of attention on Fisker now. There's a lot of attention on Faraday. Thoughts on those?
Yeah. Did you ever know anybody who had a Karma back in the day?
It was that the original Fisker?
Yeah.
I never knew someone who had
They
one.
were kind of a nightmare. So one of the reasons why I really like Lucid is they have an engineer in charge. Peter Rawlinson's an engineer. He worked at Lucid. Elon saw him, thought he was really smart, recruited him to Tesla, and then he went on. Fisker does not have that story. Fisker is very much run by a designer. He barely even cared about engineering. I remember there were some stories I read that Fisker, like his engineering team would come in and say like, we can't do this. This would be a bad idea. And he's like, no, I want the car to do this and look like that and nothing else matters, sort of a thing. So he was clearly, it was somebody in your comment section says worst car ever. He really, I think, didn't bring the right technical stuff to the table for that. And now they've had this reboot and I'm supposed to trust him and all. But I think at this point, you gotta show me something really great for me to kind of change my tune. But I'm not really that trusting of Fisker and Faraday for different reasons. They had a lot of hype when they came out the gate, and they had recruited a lot of really smart people from Tesla, which is what you do, right? If you're making a new car company. But I think they had some funding issues and they couldn't quite get going. And I also didn't like the car, right? I mentioned I love the Lucid Air. I've always thought it was a beautiful car. That Faraday Futures car, it kind of looks like a ID4, a Volkswagen ID4, I think.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's just not something that really like stuck out to me. So I'd put both those cars in the category of show me something, and I'd happily change my tune. But I think they
But
need
you're
a
not
little
doing that with
more.
Lucid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think if they've delayed their production, which I probably would have expected. Rivian and Lucid have been trying to do this during a pandemic last year, and now we're still in it. They have a new factory that they just finished. So I really do think they're going to be delaying production until later in the year, but I think they'll do it because I think they've got the factory in place and they've got the talent in place and stuff. But in some level, all three of them need to kind of show us something, right? Imagine when the first cars get off the line and journalists have it to review and put it through its paces and stuff. I think we need to see that for all of them.
The ID4 over at Volkswagen had some massive issues where they were supposed to be able to get over-the-air updates, and this was front page like Wall Street Journal is. They're supposed to get over-the-air updates, but then people actually had to drive them into the service center to get their over-the-air update. Is that a sign of just the failure of the legacy automakers? Is that just a sign that there's no chance it's going to be companies like Lucid and Tesla and maybe Rivian that are going to take the cake?
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting into consulting because I have a unique perspective of like the mechanical engineering, software engineering of this all. But
Okay.
it's not a coincidence that Lucid is in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and so is Tesla. And these other companies really are not. The way software is written is completely different compared to like other industries. Like if you are a software engineer at Boeing and you write like flight control software, you update your software every 5 years. It goes through like 3 years of validation. It's nothing like the rapid interval like at Facebook. Facebook doesn't even do a QE cycle, a quality assurance or quality engineering cycle. So what that means is they have unit tests, which are automated tests that run. So as long as you don't break any of those tests, that means whatever new feature you added doesn't break anything. You're not going to like randomly like defriend all your friends or something. They roll the update out to the mobile app, to the web app, and everything else. So that process, typically companies run what's called Agile, which is like a methodology of software development. It's kind of nerdy. Doesn't really matter. But the point is, I don't think Volkswagen is running Scrum or Agile, and I don't think they're running sprints, and they're not configured the way a software company is in quite the way I think Tesla does. I think Tesla is very much a software company. They sit down, they have a board, they prioritize their backlog of features, and they say, okay, the next feature up is fart mode. Let's get that integrated, and they build it. And when they do, they test it, they validate it, and they push it out over the air. So I think VW, the legacy makers, are not traditional, or they're not like Silicon Valley tech companies. And what they probably should do is build an office out here and just have them sit here, recruit some people who could kind of show them some stuff and become that, because that's going to be really important. People thought, oh, VW is the biggest brand, they'll have no problems. It's been the opposite. They've had problems at every turn trying to do this with the ID3 as well with software.
Jeez. Okay, so what about like in terms of investing? How heavy are you putting funds into, let's say, Lucid versus Tesla? Like percentage wise, are you just like, I got my Tesla position, everything else is going into CCIV, or is it still like 90-10 or?
The last few weeks have been pretty rough, but I'd say like 30% of my portfolio is Tesla, which is the biggest share by a mile. And I have like 15% in Lucid. And I'm actually down a little bit because I bought maybe around 30 after the announcement and stuff. But I'm just going to do a long-term hold on both. Tesla as well. I bought more Tesla on the dip. Actually, I might be up to maybe 35 or maybe even 40% on Tesla, because when they had that recent dip, I bought more of that as well. So that should give you an idea of kind of roughly the numbers.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So what about Rivian? I mean, there's maybe talk that maybe they'll go public or something like that. Would you invest in them too?
Yeah, I would. I love Rivian. I love what they're doing, and their founder again is very technical. You can clearly tell that's the theme that I look for.
Yeah.
What's interesting with Rivian is, and I think the reason they don't, I mean, they've been delayed, right? They were supposed to deliver cars a year ago, but they don't get any flack the way Lucid does. And I think I've thought about this. I think the reason why is Rivian doesn't really compete with Tesla at all. Like no one says Rivian versus Tesla. Those words have you ever heard a headline in any magazine or publication where they kind of phrase it that way? Because I
No,
haven't.
I mean, they kind of honestly, it seems like they've got some really cool concepts here, but I mean, how close are they even though? Maybe
They
that's
should
why we
be.
don't.
Yeah, no, they should be close. I mean, they were supposed to deliver, 6 months ago, and they're going to be delayed maybe again also later end of this year. But they've got production, and they should be producing cars. But for whatever reason, I think it's first of all the lifestyle brand of Rivian, and their story. They just get more love than Lucid does for whatever reason. But
Hmm,
I love Rivian as well. I mentioned that's the pickup truck. Check out the R1S, which is the SUV.
this one right
Yeah,
here.
that one. Yeah. So I will say the front, that headlight design isn't my favorite, but if you look at every other angle of this car, tell me that's not like a baby Range Rover.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good looking car. And it's more of a traditional car, and it doesn't have the aerodynamic treatment. So as a result, the range isn't the best. It has a really big battery, but only 300 miles of range. But it'll
Wonder
appeal to
what
a
kind
ton
of
of people.
autonomy they'll use because I don't think they've announced either.
Correct. That's a good question.
I don't understand why. Like maybe it's possible. Maybe I'm just overvaluing how important I think the self-driving is. I mean, to me, I'm never buying a car without self-driving again. Like why? Why would I have anything else? And I think once more people realize like, oh my gosh, this self-driving is so amazing, everybody else is going to think that way too. I mean, maybe I'm early on it, but like why are they not prioritizing this? It just blows my mind.
Wildly challenging engineering problem. I did a
Mhm.
video on my channel where I said, which is harder, a self-landing rocket, like what SpaceX is doing, or a
Yeah.
self-driving car? Because I actually had a little Twitter fight with somebody who was like, Elon is the guy that could land a rocket. Of course, he'll figure out self-driving. He's like, actually, self-driving is a much more challenging problem because it's not
Huh.
deterministic. It's you have to build a machine that predicts what to do, and as opposed to like just writing code that'll handle the problem. Um, I'll say this. Here's the analogy. I call you up and I go, Kevin, I got this great idea. Let's build the next iPhone. We'll call it KOS. It's going to be our own operating system. And we sit down and we're working on this problem. That would be what you just said is kind of like an investor coming up to us and going, well, where's Minecraft on where's the next killer game? It's like, well, building this new phone and this new operating system is hard enough. And now you want me
Mhm.
to solve self-driving? Like no, probably no company has that kind of, um, they're not in a position to spend money that way. They have to
Mm.
just figure out how to make a car, which is stupidly, impossibly hard to begin with. So I think the key to Rivian and Lucid both is don't go down that path just yet. Partner with somebody, try to get like lane keep, like enhanced autopilot. I have that. That's
Yeah.
what I use. Just keep me in my lane for 500 miles on the 5 to the Bay Area. And so get that, like the Mach-E has that, the Bolt has that. Get that first and foremost. Get the car built, figure out margins, like optimize, make your stuff better and cheaper, and then bring in FSD. So that might be the better approach. And this, by the way,
Mm.
to your point, this is where Tesla's on top because they don't have to
Yeah,
make that
because
decision.
they're
They're
doing
doing both.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it just seems like Tesla is like 3 or 4 companies in one. I mean, you got the car, the self-driving, then they got energy. I mean, how can you not just go all in on Tesla? Like, why are you bothering with CCAV?
Yeah, good question. I think Tesla's their market cap at this point, the market is building in that excitement into the price currently at
Mm,
$500 billion and like kind of like their PE ratio they're trading at. I think that excitement is built into it. So
okay.
where does their stock go from here? I think being like a $1 trillion company in the next 1 year is probably possible. But I think at this point now, the market probably needs to see like the Cybertruck. One of your commenters mentioned about the Cybertruck and manufacturing that. That'll be a sight to behold. Wait until you see Cybertrucks on LA roads in rush
Whew.
hour traffic.
I can't wait. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
want to
it's
be
gonna
in
be
rush
fun.
hour traffic, but I can't wait for the Cybertruck myself. I mean,
Me
that's
too.
just fun.
Talk about 500 miles of range. There's no cheaper way right now than a Cybertruck.
Really? Why?
So for whatever reason, the craziest part about that announcement to me wasn't the specs; it was the prices. the Cybertruck prices are ludicrous to me. And one of your commenters mentioned about like the manufacturing processes, not needing paint, the stainless steel and how they stamp it, very little in the way of curves. You might just need like a machine to kind of like stamp over a couple of pieces and you're good to go. So if they can leverage some of the tech, and this particular aluminum is what they use on SpaceX with the Starship. So if they can kind of leverage some of that synergy between the research and engineering that happens over there with Tesla, maybe they can build this car at a crazy lower margin than anybody else. That's kind of the hope. But the Lucid Air would cost you 160. The Plaid Plus would cost you 140 to get the 500 miles of range. And I think the top of the line Cybertruck, which is what I reserved, is 70,000. If I'm not
Motor,
mistaken.
yeah.
Crazy.
Wow. So what's going to come first? I mean, us doing electric VTOLs or robo taxis taking over. You know, is one a bridge to the other, or are these two totally different industries?
That great question. The eVTOL. I think I saw you interview somebody talking about this last week. Maybe it was the same Warren interview. I think eVTOLs are a little bit of ways, and the main reason I say that is because, again, regulatory. I like engineering problems because I feel confident that engineers can solve engineering problems. Regulatory problems are a lot trickier, and unfortunately, that actually is at the cornerstone. Yeah, it's at the cornerstone of both self-driving and eVTOL, because the FAA isn't messing around, and you can imagine how hard their life is going to get when you and I are taking our eVTOLs to get coffee, and now it's just going to get utterly crazy. The self-driving car will probably happen first. Even that, I think, will be a challenge for regulatory purposes, even more than engineering. You know, plane aircraft today can fly themselves. Like, there's no reason why you have to have a pilot. You can program a plane to take off and land. But we have two dudes that we pay a lot of money every flight to sit in there. And the reason is humans, we don't trust machines, and that will take time to change. And so I think lawmakers are kind of on the weird situation where they have to try to figure out, how does this new tech fit in while we don't like alienate our viewers, or our citizens who don't want to see a world where there's like some car with no driver in it driving around their neighborhood when their kids are riding their bikes. Like, there's going to be challenges like that.
So how far away until I can fly around with the eVTOLs?
So current energy density, and even with some of the improvements we've made, and like Tesla's making with the bigger pack cells and like tabless designs, I think having any sort of like runtime to be able to operate for any meaningful amount of time to get somewhere is probably still a little bit of a challenge. I'm thinking the next breakthrough, like imagine solid state batteries. I don't know if you've been keeping up with QuantumScape, for example.
Come on, man. That stock went whoop.
Yeah, it really did. They have no even forecast of profit for like 5 years.
Yeah,
huge problem to solve.
I don't even think they're gonna. I mean, one thing that, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, like, one thing that bugged me is like it went so viral, but they talked about it was almost solely because of the name solid state, but they just have a lab tested solid. They have nothing stable for actual battery packs. Like, are we just so desperate for another investing opportunity, or is there actually something at Quantum?
I think they've got stuff, but I think it's the former. I think we are just desperate for the next investing opportunity. And this is where, as bullish as I am on the EV market, I would caution everybody to kind of slow down and remember Nikola and some of this stuff. You have to slow down and have a healthy level of skepticism, because like with QuantumScape, that problem is a really challenging problem to solve. Maybe we can have a call later and talk about solid state batteries. That'd be a fun chat as well. But they probably have something. There's probably some advancements that are happening, I think 5 years out, which is a long time for a public company now that has gone public to not have any revenue. And even if they figure out the battery, that still says nothing about manufacturing. I think it's a licensing play at that point, right? You license this out to other people to use your tech, your glass electrolyte or something, or you get bought out by somebody like Tesla.
Well, that sounds like a Microvision play then, because all they want to do is license or get bought out.
Yeah. It's a tough thing. Even when you figure out solid state, you got to manufacture it now at volume and at cost.
Right.
Are you going to compete with
so
LG
what's going to happen? what's going to happen first? Solid state batteries or like gene editing therapeutics? That's another space where it's just like, that again could be a topic on its own too. But like, how difficult is this on the scale here?
That's a good question. I will say, as a mechanical engineer, the engineering science that I find the most utterly daunting is biology, because
Yeah.
biology is the one study that is not even repeatable. Like, you and I can do the same thing and have a different outcome, which isn't
Yeah.
true for a plane. Like, you put something in the air and it's going to fall at a predictable rate with gravity. So
Right.
biology is a crazy, challenging thing. I'm curious. I'm going to flip this around and ask you, what do you think? Solid state battery or gene editing and
I want to believe this whole like the CRISPRs and the Invitae and all these. Look, I love the Pfizer. Hey, well, we can take, what they're doing even with the vaccines, right? We can take messenger RNA and put it into your body like a cassette tape and make your thighs glow, which they did with mice or whatever in a lab. Like, that stuff is all fascinating to me. But I'll tell you, the one thing I'm the most hesitant to invest in is bio. Because, all it takes is, cool, you edited this person, and then he died 3 months later. That stock goes from, $100 billion market cap, let's say, to zero, like that, like, it's scary because we don't know. Like, with programming, we know 1 + 1 is 2, but with bio, I don't know, I guess we'll see.
I'm with you. I don't invest in any of the biotech startups, not because I don't think they're deeply fascinating, but for that reason. We used to like use mercury and lead as medicine,
Yeah, oops.
And yeah, exactly. I'll talk about the opposite of what you intended. Yeah, there's clear interest. There's a lot of ailments around the world that people would love to see cures for, but your commenter just mentioned playing God is risky. Exactly.
Sure.
And it doesn't take much to derail something. If even let's say 2% of people who take your treatment have like some catastrophic failures or death or something, 2% of it adds up really quick, and it doesn't take many human lives lost before people care.
Whew. Oh, well, that's interesting. Even with how they're doing like the in vitro fertilizations these days, where they can do like a gene diagram essentially on these embryos, and then you could decide, well, this kid's gonna have blue eyes, this kid's gonna have brown eyes, which one do you want? It's kind of weird. In that case, you're not even changing anything, you're just picking, which that already is kind of interesting. Like, oh, let's pick that one. Very bizarre. But gene editing, my gosh, way above my thoughts or maybe capacity. But okay, so solid state, if that's 4 or 5 years away, why is NEO talking about having like a partial solid state battery in 2022 for their new ET7? Is this marketing fugazi here, or what is this?
I think it is. It's one of these terms. Do you remember when Kodak had, I think it was like 3 years ago during like the Bitcoin rise of like 2017, Kodak had this cryptocurrency, and they had this blockchain announcement, and their stock just had this 1-day spike or something. It was kind of the thing to talk about in 2017, 2018 was like a blockchain. I think in 2021, if you're especially in this space, if you talk about a solid state battery, I just feel like that just means you traded a higher multiple or something just by talking about it. It's clickbait in a way, right? Toyota's said the same thing. They were supposed to have a solid state battery that they were going to unveil at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, which was all pushed back. But I'm going to go off on a limb and say they might have one. And by the way, we do have solid state batteries, like pacemakers and stuff use a solid state battery, but it's wildly expensive. They might not have the cycle life of other batteries. There's other challenges that you have to solve for. So really the point is commercializing it. When can I get a commercialized solid state battery for cheaper than what Tesla is paying for their cells now? That's when I care.
On that, I've never thought about this before, but how do the pacemakers not run on a battery?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there might be some sort of, they're very low voltage devices. Maybe there's some way of recharging while they're inside of you. I'm curious if somebody in the comment section has an answer to that. Or they might just need some sort of a maintenance interval.
Bizarre. Okay, yeah. Don't want to miss that maintenance date. Jeez. Woo. Well, bio just makes me nervous. Okay, so Now, but you mentioned Toyota here on solid state. Isn't Toyota the one that's like, we're not really going to focus on EVs. We're not really going to focus on self-driving that much. Right now, we're just going to kind of keep doing us. What can we even trust them as far as we can throw them at this point?
I'm with you. And I put Honda in the same category. So I mentioned this like a couple of years ago, but I kind of predicted that Toyota and Honda would be the slowest to adapt. And the reason is twofold. First, and this might be biased, but I think Honda and Toyota make the best engines, like gasoline engines on earth. If I were to buy a gas car, I've always been a Honda person. If I were to buy an SUV, I'd buy a Toyota. They're just really good at it, first of all. So when you're really good at something, the last thing you want to do is give up your advantage. That thing keeping other people from competing with you. Like if you and I got together and thought, let's build a car company, we would never have done that in the age of gas engine cars. Because you and I, until the day we die, would probably never build an engine that could compete with these guys. But in the electric motor world, we could. You and I could get in your garage and build an EV that could be pretty cool, decent. We market it well. Maybe we'll sell a couple. So they had that advantage. The second thing is they sell a lot of their cars in North America. And North America typically is way later on down the road in terms of regulation and stuff. So in Europe, they're going to ban the sale of gas cars in the next 5 years in some places.
Yeah.
So VW, who's also a big manufacturer, they sell more in Europe. So I always said VW will get their act together first because they'll lose out quicker. But Honda and Toyota, who are going to be selling cars in America, we go back and forth. The last president pretty much undid everything that the one before that did. It's just, you're going to be able to get away not making EVs for a longer period of time. So my prediction was that Toyota and Honda would be the last to make that change for that reason. I think they have the engineering clout to do it, but they have no market advantages. They have to go try to get sales like everybody else. So you're on the same footing as everybody else, where for the last 30 years of your existence, you have dominated because nobody can compete with you because of your market advantage being so strong. But this is also why people are happy, because we now have a new frontier that the level playing field allows new people to come in and compete.
Got it. What about, another question here? Materials. I get this all the time. People are like, okay, well, I like, Kevin, you're investing in Tesla. Cool. You do you. But I'm going to go buy MP materials, the lithium miners. I'm going to get my copper because you got to have copper in the coils of the motor. Why don't we just go buy up all the materials? Personally, I'm not a customer of materials. I don't make it a habit to buy copper coils, so I have no freaking clue which company to even start with. Is that just why wouldn't you just buy the thing? Why would you buy the materials, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of excitement, you're not going to get the same level of excitement if you're the material supply side as you would if you're the aggregator, the person who builds something. So let's just talk stock. If you're building Tesla or Lucid Motors, you're going to trade at a much higher multiple because you're sexy, you're glamorous. You have there's something about you that people see. They see a car driving down the road. They see the marketing material and the materials and the cool tech. Whereas if you're, Piedmont Lithium, or you're one of these guys who's on the supply chain side, it's just not as glamorous or as sexy, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a profitable thing to be in. So as far as good opportunities for investing, yeah, I think they're great opportunities for investing. I don't have, all the money in the world, so I have to pick and choose my battles. And I'm a believer that you should try to invest in a handful of things that you can research really well, as opposed to just throwing your money in tons of different places, and it's impossible to keep on top of the news and stuff. So I think those are good investments. I think material, lithium, you mentioned all the copper and manganese and nickel, not so much cobalt. I think we're going to get away from cobalt because of the human cost of that one. But those are good investment opportunities for sure. And if you have like a geology background, or you're more hip to that part of the business and you have insight there, which I don't have personally, I think that might make for a better investment.
Any need for these tunnels if we have full self-driving? Elon and the boring tunnel. Like, well, who cares if we have full self-driving? I mean, I remember being 7 years old and thinking to myself, it was my father and I, we used to have these conversations. Obviously, this was way before EVs. I mean, we're talking 21, 22 years ago now. That's scary. But I remember these, and I remember talking to my dad about, why is it that when we're at a red light, 7 years old asking this question, why is it that when we're at a red light and we're way at the back in traffic, it takes so long for us to start going when the light turns green. And in theory, if everybody was on like a conveyor belt or all computers, we could all just, if we all literally hit the gas at the same exact second with the same acceleration, we wouldn't, like, traffic would be so much more efficient. And in theory, I don't think there would exist traffic jams and there wouldn't be a need for tunnels. Are tunnels a waste of time if we go full charge driving everything?
I think they would be. I think there's two other things at play as well. I think with the pandemic, we have shifted how we kind of work. We've done more online calls and done more meetings in, virtually. So as a result, I wouldn't be surprised if more companies, especially in interest of lowering carbon emissions, let their employees work from home 2 or 3 days a week. So we
Yeah.
start to do that, and like traffic decreases to begin with. And then part two of that is the self-driving robotaxi. Did you follow that company, Zoox? I think it is Zoox, which Amazon bought.
Oh, Amazon.
That little quirky looking
You don't know
thing.
what
You can
the
look at-
back is.
Yeah, so that was a glimpse of a ride hailing platform car that was built for that purpose. It doesn't look like a car that you and I drive because, well, if you're building a robotaxi network, don't build it like a car you've traditionally built. Make it perfectly built for that. So my vision of a robotaxi car would be like pods. Imagine you've got your Falcon Wing doors on your X. Imagine if there were a couple of those, and when your car pulls up, your door opens up, you go and sit down, and you have a private little cocoon, if you will. You have a little laptop and you do your work. You don't even know if people are in the car with you. If you're traveling with your wife, you can put a little window down and you can see each other. But if you don't know the people you're driving with, you put it up. So now you're servicing 5 or 6 people at a time. And if you start to do that and bring the prices down to where they're cheaper than a subway ticket, why? Yeah, there it is right there. I think it looks kind of cool. But I think this is a look at what like urban mobility might look like in a world when you don't need a driver per se.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, but this technology here, I mean, how far away is this? I mean, look, it looks cool, but I mean, I know Waymo's doing it, but aren't they all completely on mapped streets? And isn't that going to take forever?
Yeah, I actually don't know how this one is doing the self-driving aspect. I see a bunch of what appears to be cameras. Hopefully, it's computer vision. So really, at the heart of this debate, and this is another one that I get a lot of comments about because Elon has come out and called LiDAR stupid and a waste of time.
Yes.
So Tesla and most people's approach is computer vision, and you have to have computer vision because if you don't have computer vision, meaning you have a camera looking out and an algorithm that's doing like tracking and figuring out what things are, then you can't do things like read a stop sign. LiDAR can't make out a stop sign. LiDAR can tell you there's a sign at 48 feet from here, but it can't read the stop sign, right? So computer vision is king, no doubt about it. If you don't have a really great computer vision platform, you're not going to have the general solution, meaning a car that could just go anywhere and figure things out, like you and I could. I could drop you in your Model X in Hawaii, someplace you've never been, and you'll figure out how to drive because your human brain can figure that out. The Waymo solution is like a high definition LiDAR map. What's interesting is I wouldn't actually be surprised if Waymo was operating in little select cities before Tesla, but not able to operate everywhere. So if you do a high definition LiDAR map, you drive around Chicago or LA or San Diego, and you make this map, and then you know what to expect. It's a huge amount of data, but then you know what to do in your turning and stuff. Tesla doesn't do that. Tesla says, I have a camera, so I'll do what the human does. And this is what George Hotz always talks about too from comma.ai. He says, be a person. A person doesn't have a high definition map and have it all stored. He sees a turn and he figures out what to do. He figures out is there somebody in my way? Should I stop? So I think Waymo might actually beat Tesla to market in select cities. But as far as like the general solution, that's not even close. They've
to
got
clarify,
really good
computer vision is emulating the human's eye, whereas LiDAR is trying to use a completely different system.
Yeah, LiDAR is kind of like, remember Daredevil, where he's blind and he does this thing where he kind of senses what's around him? That's kind of LiDAR. LiDAR is a visual spectrum laser that is hit something and then bounces back. And we can measure the delay between sending that pulse and getting it back and figure out the speed of light is constant. So therefore you can figure out how far away it is.
So Elon calls it like a crutch, like something just to kind of get. It's like a means to an end, and it's one of the reasons he hasn't adopted it. And then you also mentioned you can't like identify what something is in LiDAR. Is that you kind of on the same wavelength there? Is it because LiDAR, like you said, it can't identify a stop sign? It's like we see something that's an octagon, but we don't know what it is because we can't tell. Is that one of the big pros of computer vision?
I think, yeah, when Elon says that it's a crutch, what he's saying is if let's say you and I make a company and we're going to try to solve self-driving and we want to do it as fast as possible, we will do LiDAR because LiDAR will get us there quicker. We could figure out like from a LiDAR map where to turn and what to do more quickly than we could figure out computer vision. Computer vision is basically like making a human who can figure out how to drive a car, right? It's a harder problem, but at the end, you have a more general solution. One thing I say though is why not have both? Like in the case of some of these car companies, Lucid has LiDAR and it has computer vision, it has tons of cameras and stuff. Might there be a scenario that we're not thinking of where LiDAR might come in handy? Sun is low in the horizon, maybe some glare. One of your commenters mentioned fog. The challenge with fog is it might impede LiDAR as well because it is a visible light spectrum, technology. So I'm not sure how well LiDAR would work in fog, but there's going to be weather patterns and conditions and stuff that, for me, I'm thinking redundancy is not maybe a bad thing. Why not have both? Even if you 99% of the time use computer vision, why not have LiDAR as backup?
But then again, Elon's also got radar. So like, for example, if we're in the fog, the radar should still work.
Yep. Radar works well in the fog, but radar is generally a little bit less fidelity. You can't get that high definition mapping of something like a LiDAR. And that just has to do with how big the waves are and kind of, you can get a general idea of shapes and stuff, but you're not going to be able to like detect the crisp corners of like an octagon of a stop sign and stuff. But yeah, radar is the key to that.
Is that because what radar is just a bigger wavelength and it's
Yes.
not as fine tuned or something?
Yep.
Okay, interesting. But then maybe there's a distance factor too, because usually longer wavelength would mean further distance, right? And in terms of you can see further, maybe.
Yeah, and I actually think the way some of these companies do it is they have like a medium, and long range radar stack, so they're able to kind of resolve in all those spectrums. But don't forget too, you need to have computers that can take all this information and figure out something. And there's also GPS. One of your viewers mentions. There's also the GPS data. So we have to take all of this in real time and figure this out. That's a tough problem to solve. And they're doing this at like 60 frames a second. So you can imagine the computer workload on something like that.
And one of the commenters here is just reminding me of this infrared. We've got Sandy Monroe. He mentioned that he thinks Tesla might have to adopt infrared in the future. Can you speak to that a little bit? Look, I mean, I've got a FLIR. I get infrared. I pointed at a wall. I go, oh, damn, builder missed some insulation there. Actually happened. It's pretty hilarious.
Really?
But beyond that, like, okay, why might I need that in a car for self-driving?
So what's interesting is like any camera, like if you grab your pocket camera or phone camera, it detects infrared automatically. What most companies do is they add a filter to block infrared because you don't want infrared screwing up your visual spectrum photo, right?
Okay.
So cameras inherently detect infrared. It's like built in, but it will screw up your image if you didn't block it, if you wanted like a nice crisp iPhone shot. That being said, if they wanted to do something with infrared, it might just be as simple as, one of the cameras has a filter or there's some problem that they can solve. I will say this, and I'm curious what I'm gonna flip this around on you. A lot of people on Twitter always have this idea that my car today, my Tesla, has everything it needs for full self-driving. That's amazing. And I've always said, are you sure? Are you 100% sure that we don't need a slightly higher resolution camera? Are you sure we don't need this or that? It's a hedge. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla doesn't have to do some sort of retrofit to change some little detail. Like, for example, if you look at your dash cam footage, it's really low resolution. It looks really bad. And the reason why is on purpose, they use a very low megapixel camera. First of all, more light per pixel, which is good, better in the low light. and also less computer workload. If you're trying to take like a 4K image in 60 frames per second, real time detect motion of objects, we're talking huge amounts of computer workload. So
Right.
maybe in the future we'll get there. But if you're telling me that with our current SoCs, with our current cameras at 1.5 megapixels, do we have all the hardware we would ever need for full self-driving? I'm not 100% convinced of that. What do you think?
I have regularly believed that there is a real possibility that for certain edge case scenarios, like I watch some of these full self-driving videos and I see the Tesla with the full self-driving betas, and maybe they're gonna fix the betas, but totally miss depth of street. So an example would be one that comes to mind is car goes up to a left turn, waits for traffic to pass, fine, that's easy, turns left, railroad track, road falls after the railroad track, something that a human would slow down for. The Tesla's plowing right through it, and it's very uncomfortable, probably not safe. That's just one example. I wouldn't be shocked if in the future personally, I think they should just buy Microvision, but they buy Microvision and just, okay, we're going to go swap out everybody's, rear view mirror. And in the little front of that's going to be the little LiDAR sensor. And there we go. We get our cheap LiDAR. We figure out how to get the cost down of that, but we have that as a backup as well. Yeah, I don't need a spinning dome on the roof to tell me, how the size of the semi truck behind me. I don't care. But what's in front of me is very important. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, well said. I agree. I've been in a car with FSD. I had a kind of a similar story. The harder stuff, it did really well. And then at one point, we pulled up to a stop sign. Very obvious that the car in front of us is about to turn left, in front of us, off to the right. And that we should wait because we came later. And the car just started speeding up, like right as the car is right in front of us. So, that's just, they need more time to work out every possible scenario. But yeah, you're right. When you talk about like skew angles as you're trying to resolve stuff further off into the top and the right, the camera quality degrades, just optics, just physics and stuff. So yeah, there are some challenges that maybe having some redundancy is not the worst idea. But we'll see how they progress. They're supposed to have an FSD beta update coming out soon. And I'm sure with each iteration it gets better, but
it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm bullish, but I'm also a little skeptical that they might have to, because the thing that bothers me is nobody else is doing solely what Elon is doing. Everyone else, some form of LiDAR. It's scary.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one person I wouldn't bet against, it's Elon. But at the same time, I think when Elon made those decisions back in the days, we were talking about like Waymo, this ridiculous dish on top of a minivan. It's just who wants to drive that thing around? But they've miniaturized it. There's companies who have miniaturized it and brought the cost down to a point where adding LiDAR isn't cost prohibitive. And if you have it and you don't need it and you never really use it much, that's fine. But to say that we're not going to include it at all is, that's just one less tool in your toolkit. As an engineer, I kind of think, why not let some of these different things emerge? Like, I'm not completely against hydrogen. I'm happy to see some company trying to figure out a cheap and clean way to produce hydrogen. If you can do that, great. I don't think they have much of a place in commercial cars, but I'm a believer in letting companies like run things to ground and figure out what sticks,
Do you think it's just Elon's obsession with less parts, less cost? Let's get to that $25,000 car. Cut. Is this just Elon's personality of stubbornness?
Yeah, I kind of liken him to Steve Jobs. They're two kind of the reality distortion field kind of people who can just completely change what seems possible and impossible. I think Elon is very much the same way as Jobs. That makes him difficult to work for. I know some friends that work at Tesla and they work mad hours. That's why I have no interest in applying to work at Tesla. I'm not trying to work 90 hours a week at this point in my life. I have kids and stuff, but I think that is part of it. Steve Jobs famously said that we're not going to ever build a big iPhone. Like, he didn't care if you wanted it. Like, that's Steve Jobs for you. He does not care what you think. He does not care if you want a big phone. He believes phones should be 3.5 inches tiny. He was wrong on that. When he passed away, I think the one thing that Apple has done probably better after he left, because I was a huge Jobs fan too, is make massive phones. Phones are like 7 inches big now. The iPhone is probably what Jobs thought of as like an iPad not too long ago. So
Wow.
I think Elon is similar. He's very, very stubborn on things. He's been right a lot. With FSD, he kind of was a little early to the game. He said he'd have it like a couple of years ago, but I understand where he was coming from at the time. But I really think if LiDAR sensors are miniaturized and the cost comes down to a point where they're just a commodity that you just stick on your car, I can't think of any good reason why you wouldn't have it. And if you don't really ever need it and your computer vision is that great, but you have one more thing, if you will.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Steve Jobs, that kind of made me think a little bit back to your Fisker comment, though. Henry, I think his last name's Fisker, right? Yeah, Henry or Henrik, designer over Fisker. One of your arguments was that he's, trying to do things not considering the engineer. Didn't Steve Jobs do that? Remember with that like bulbous Mac? It's like, no, I want it to be this shape and figure it out. It's like, we can't do round. The chips are square. And he basically made him do it anyway. Is that, or is this guy, is that possible? Is that fair? Or is he just totally missing it anyway?
I think that's fair. Good point. Very good point. I think that's fair. He did some things that were questionable. Remember the antenna gate thing? He wanted this beautiful stainless steel band. You're holding it wrong. Like you're telling me that I'm holding my phone wrong. That was how he came out. And his PR people had to like shut him up and issue like free bumpers for a while.
Yeah, I actually got one of those free bumpers. But what's so weird is they still have that now. The new 12 also has that. I guess they've just figured out how to make that.
Right.
This point, when you held the old one or whatever, like your signal went from like 5 bars to 0.
Yeah, and I remember he famously came out and he was like chewing people out for holding his phone wrong. That's Jobs for you, right? I don't think Henrik Fisker is quite Jobs, but I think as far as like the obsession with design, yeah, that's fair. That's probably but Jobs had really smart engineers around him too. Like you gotta have both.
And maybe Henry doesn't. We don't know, or Henrik. So
I'd love to know more about him.
Fair. What you mentioned hydrogen. I keep referring to this as like a 2030s dream. Is it closer than we think?
The challenging thing with hydrogen is there's no clean way of sourcing it. The clean way of sourcing it would be like having a bunch of solar panels, which is kind of what Trevor Milton said he had at his HQ at Nikola, and then running like free electricity from the sun to run electrolysis to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen atom from water. But that problem is it's really expensive. Like the end result of how much hydrogen you have is way less than if you just took that solar energy and stuck it in a battery right now, right? Like a Powerwall, for example. So for that reason, the way we really have hydrogen today is as a kind of a byproduct of like fossil fuel fracking and things like hydrogen forming from natural gas extraction. So that's not a clean energy at all. And that's kind of the thing about it that people haven't really talked about. But imagine a world where there's some breakthrough radical new technology that is able to separate hydrogen in a very clean way. That's exciting to me. I mean, there's applications for hydrogen, especially imagine like huge long haul shipping, like all the cargo ships out there, maybe like aircraft potentially. There's challenges too. You have to have a cylindrical cylinder to keep high pressure hydrogen. People think of the Hindenburg, there's challenges there too. But I think the challenge is going to be how do we get it? And if we have energy, why not just stick it in a battery? We already do that now. Yeah. So that's the drawback.
I see. Okay, yeah, it's kind of funny too because isn't Hindenburg the short seller that ended up exposing Nikola?
Yeah.
With Hindenburg's and hydrogen.
Yeah, the irony was
on point.
Was on point.
So okay, so what do you think? Like, what's the year that hydrogen actually goes mainstream and we have the infrastructure for it, and, or does it ever? Like, is there any chance of it being a 2020s thing?
I don't think we're going to see. Okay, my prediction is we're not going to see like hydrogen charging stations like we have gas stations now, because hydrogen doesn't make enough sense for a commercial car. I think we're already showing EVs that can go in the next couple of years, like 1 million miles. There's just going to be no need for hydrogen. It's just way simpler. And I can make electricity at home. Remember that if we embrace hydrogen, we are basically giving Chevron and ExxonMobil like leverage over us for the rest of our lives again, like we have with oil. They
Wow.
basically hold all the cards. Whereas like I have enough solar that if I charge my car at the right times, I can charge my car from the sun, and my utility company has no idea I even exist because my bill is zero. I can't do that
Right.
with hydrogen. Not easily anyway. I guess I could stick some leads into some salt water and try to extract hydrogen, but
Ex-
not practically.
Electrolysis, and that's expensive to do on its
Expensive.
own too.
Right.
So, huh. Okay, so no hydrogen infrastructure coming to my home anytime soon. What about like solar? When are they going to make these darn panels more efficient? You're an engineer. These things are like what, 19-20% efficient. I mean, it's, if you
21.
think,
There's some 21s out there, you know.
yeah, it's okay. So I mean, it seems like there's so much more potential for solar. When are we going to get this to even 30-40% efficiency?
Yeah, at this point, there's going to need to be some sort of a breakthrough with the photovoltaic elements and things that go into it, because we've been hovering around this point for a while. That's usually a good telltale sign of like how mature something is. If anybody out there thinks like the internal combustion engine car is going to be 70% efficient one day, it will never be, because we've had 100 years with it. And look what's happened. Like in 100 years, we've gotten to around, 20, 30%.
Right.
With solar, it kind of feels the same way. But the good news is it's so cheap now, even though
Yeah.
it's not 100% efficient, it's keeping that heat off your roof, which keeps your attic cooler, which keeps your your cooling bills cheaper. And it's so cheap now that Tesla's selling at $1.50 a watt, right? Which
Yeah.
means if you get a 5 kilowatt system, it's not necessarily a deal breaker in terms of breaking the bank. So does it
Right.
need to be more efficient? How much more efficient does it have to be?
I mean, that's true. I mean, yeah, even if you spend 10 grand on a system, after tax credits or whatever, hey, if that saves you a couple $100 a month, that's saving you after tax dollars. I mean, that's a nice ROI, and those things probably aren't going to go bad for 30-40 years. So, hey,
Yeah.
why not do it, right?
And your audience is clearly very, very smart. Somebody in the audience just mentioned the key is really not the solar. We have so much solar in California. I don't know if you know this, but at really peak times in the summertime, we curtail generation, meaning we throw it away.
Oh, I did not know
Today,
that.
today in
Wait,
California. Yeah. The
throw
problem
away.
is we don't have storage. What was that?
So you're saying there's so much we don't even need it at some points that they
Right.
just
Like
turn it
high
off.
noon. Yeah. Like high noon in the summertime, we have so much generation that there's just no demand for it. And so the real challenge with electricity is the projecting the demand, right? So that's what the grid has to do. Right now we're at work, so our homes aren't using electricity, but then we come home at 5 o'clock and then we turn the air conditioning on, or Saturday and Sunday. You have to have electricity ready whenever a person might need it. How do you forecast that? That's tough. That's what batteries kind of solve. With batteries, if there's tons of sun shining, we'll stick that all into the battery pack. And then suddenly, if everyone's turning on their air conditioning, or they're in Britain, they always say their kettles, right? So after their favorite TV show at 7 o'clock on BBC, they all turn on their kettles. So one of the major challenges in the UK is like there's a 7 o'clock huge spike of demand that they have to be ready for when everybody's turning on their kettles. I know it sounds funny, but
And I guess
we don't drink.
gas.
What's that?
They must electricity then over there for their kettles.
Yeah, those little 1,000 watt electric kettles, if everyone's turning it on at the same time, it could add up. So a battery solves all of that by letting us generate wind and electricity whenever that happens, and then storing it for when we need it. So if you were a grid operator, you would love to see that. Otherwise, the challenge is the solar duck curve you've probably heard of. There's this massive solar generation from 9 a.m. till 4 or 5 p.m. Well, that's great. But we have this nuclear power plant that you can't turn off. So what are we going to do with that? We can't just turn it on and off. So then they have peaker power plants, which are typically natural gas, maybe coal. And those they turn on and off depending on when they project demand. So
Hmm.
this is the crazy life of a grid operator. They have to basically be like projecting the future of demand and try to supply it. So the key in the next 5 years, if you want to clean up our act and make a grid that's more sustainable, is energy storage, either via battery, maybe hydrogen. I don't know. There's even like mechanical forms. There's companies that will lift weight and stack it onto a tall tower when there's extra solar. And then when the sun goes down, they can drop those weights and run a generator and get the power back. Or hydro, right? We can run water uphill and run it back down. But energy storage is the key.
That is interesting. Yeah, because I mean, electricity demand is instantaneous, and electricity moves. I'm pretty sure. I don't know through wires. Maybe you would know. Doesn't it
Pretty
move at the
much.
speed of light? It moves pretty
Yeah, pretty
instantaneously,
much.
right? Okay.
Right.
So in that case, you've got you can if everybody turns on their kettles at the same time, the generators operating at the grid, they're instantaneously getting put under an exponential larger amount of load or draw that they need to provide for, and batteries might be able to just instantly switch on and provide that relief for the system is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, instead of having to turn on a natural gas plant, because even if you have nuclear, which is, no carbon emissions, and solar and everything else, the minute those kettles turn on, you got to go dirty again and burn dinosaurs, right?
But why are people so anti the nuclear power?
Yeah, it's a talking about like hydrogen, the Hindenburg, right? We have a memory of it.
Uh,
Nobody thinks warm and fuzzy when they think nuclear power. We think of war, right? Now, then we think of like Fukushima and Chernobyl. Bad things could happen. It's a incredibly destructive force. And what's really scary about nuclear is if you screw up, you're going to negatively impact a place for like 100,000 years. You're going to make a place uninhabitable, right?
like
There are
Chernobyl, huh?
Chernobyl's. There aren't new apartment buildings being built over there. Like the area is kind of just off limits. You can't go there. So
Uh,
I don't want to see a lot of the world fall into that. I do think it's a good clean option, especially as a bridge. We've probably heard the term a bridge tech, which means we're not really fully ready. We don't have enough batteries even right now for all the EVs. So how are we going to have grid batteries too, right? So we're going to need a bridge. And so I'm hoping that we keep our nuclear power plants in commission for the next 10 years or so until we have a good answer to that question.
Yeah, because after Fukushima, I always thought it was neat that Germany, for example, had tons of these power plants, nuclear power plants. But after Fukushima, they just shut them all down. Probably not instantaneously. Over time, they shut them all down. And they, they do a lot of solar and wind in Germany as well. But I thought to myself, like, I mean, like, I know there was an accident, but it feels like a waste now because now we're potentially offsetting that with natural gas and coal when you have the facilities there. It's just all because of that the image or risk mitigation. Is it really that risky?
Yeah. Part of it too is there's a natural kind of maintenance cycle. So, if a nuclear power plant runs for 20 years, how many of Germany's were nearing that point? Did they
Uh,
have plants that they were like, okay, we either spend $1 billion, upgrade it to modern code, and then rechange the reactor fuels and get going again, or do we just say, you know what, screw it, let's just shut it down? So there's like
yeah.
a recurring cost to keeping these things open, and
Uh,
as like wind and solar is getting cheaper and cheaper, it might have been a business decision as well.
yeah.
And part of this
Okay.
public outcry, if you're the person who lives in that neighborhood and Fukushima just happened and you're 5 miles from a plant, how do you feel? Are you writing your Congress people? Probably.
You're probably right. I think if you flip it and say, Kevin, would you live next to a nuclear power plant? I think the answer would be a hard no. So
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Would I live?
I'd take a pass.
I do. So, that's a good one. So, okay, what do you think about Enphase? Just hitting stocks here. Have you ever done a deep dive on Enphase?
Huge fan of Enphase.
Yeah.
I got solar in 2010. And when I
Oh, early?
did, yeah, yeah, very early. And when I did, my installer told me, you got these tall trees, you should go with this little company called Enphase. They make microinverters, and here's some of the benefits. They last longer because each inverter deals with less current, less electricity. So as a result, they don't get as hot and they last longer. If any one of them fails, it doesn't affect the rest of them. And shading on one panel won't affect the other. So I was all for it. My Enphase M215s are now 10 years old. They have never skipped a beat. They record data, send it to my little Enphase account in the cloud, and I can show you 10 years of constant data. In 10 years, I've changed computers, I've bought new cars, new refrigerators, and I had the same inverters, man. I'm such a fan. I actually remember the stupidest investing thing I ever did was I believed in Enphase and I bought their stock early on. For a long time, it just lay dormant, right? And finally, there was a period, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, where it went from $3 or $4 to $6 or $7, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just 2x my money," and I sold, thinking it might never come back to that again. And it has been on a tear ever since. And every time I look at it, $50, oh, they overvalued. $100. They're a fantastic company, and They had this vision for the micro inverter, which, to be honest, I kind of think every panel should just have one built in the future. Maybe they partner with somebody, but I'm a fan. I'm an owner. I've had 10 years of data with it. I'm a shareholder, and I love that company.
Why don't they make their own panel?
The building, so Tesla does the solar glass roof tile, which is a wholly new product category, but you're not going to see a lot of companies trying to build solar panels because it is so commoditized at this point. It's a zero business. I mean, talk about how you're going to compete with the Chinese companies that are producing these by the bajillions. You're never going to compete unless you're SunPower, which is an American company that manufactures solar, and they're way more efficient. Like, they have the most cutting edge tech. I think they might even have like a 23% or 24% efficient panel. So SunPower is a leading cutting edge technology company. But the reality is, if I can just get a cheap brand for 20% efficient for a third of the price, that's a tough proposition. So I don't think Enphase will ever manufacture cells or solar panels. I think it's a terrible idea, but they should partner with people and start having them built in. Talk about how easy of an install process that would be.
Yeah, but it could, if Tesla goes super mainstream here with energy, isn't there a big risk to Enphase?
Great question. That's why I've lowered my holdings with Enphase for that reason. So I have some people in the industry that work in different areas. Like, for example, I partner with a company called Drone Quote, where they have no salespeople. They'll fly a drone, they'll send your information, and have many companies bid on your project. So I asked them, like, how does Tesla's new pricing, is that going to like destroy your business? So far, what they found is there are people looking and they want to compete with Tesla, or they want to see your bid compete, but Tesla doesn't operate everywhere. So that's the first thing. And also, they're one company, and if the federal tax credit goes away, will Tesla's prices go back up? There's just some questions, I think, to answer. But to answer your point, yeah, depending on how large Tesla grows their sales team and their install teams and how much business they do, it would affect Enphase because they don't use microinverters. They use solar optimizers and a grid tie inverter that they're building now.
Yeah, it was much to the demise of was it Solar Edge, I think.
Solar Edge, yeah.
Yeah. Oof. So yeah, I mean, the one thing that scares me about both Lucid and Enphase is seriously my biggest investment, Tesla, is that Tesla's just going to literally monopolize. And I know that sounds so crazy because we've had, there are hundreds of car companies. Even now, there's so much car competition. I mean, we could rattle off 10, 15, 20 really popular car companies very easily. But with this whole revolution of this self-driving and this energy transformation, Tesla basically, I feel like they're just dumping their panels and batteries at a cost or at a loss just to gain market share here. But I feel like they're just setting up to be an insane monopoly. And it's one of the reasons I think they're undervalued, which people hear me say that, and I always get comments like, you're an idiot. Fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Isn't that possible that Kathy's going to be right? Kathy Wood, it's going to be winner take most, and Tesla's a monopoly.
Yeah. With solar, no one is going, oh, I want to get a other brand, or they don't care. It's a solar product. Like, give me solar and leave me alone, and I want to make money. So I think they're eating into the business in the solar industry is going to be a thing. But you got to remember, like, there's taste involved with cars. That's kind of the difference to me. So even if, so Tesla's still making the same Model S, which means they still haven't finished out their product roadmap as far as like all their models before they talk about refreshing, right? The Model X is still the same one that you have, the one you bought. So when they refresh it, what if someone just prefers the Rivian R1S? What if they prefer the R1T to the Cybertruck? So taste comes into play. When you talk about commodities like solar, no one cares about the brand name. Like, I don't even know. I do know, but I'm an exception. The average person has no clue what panel brand they have up there. They don't care. Like, I want a 350-watt panel, put them on my roof, and I'm on my way. But with cars and stuff, there's the Apple fact, right? Everyone knows what brand of smartphone they have. So even if Android or some company dominates and they're the best sellers, there's still room for how many smartphone companies are there? I think the smartphone industry might be a good way to think about it, especially considering you got the brand loyalty. Tesla has brand loyalty like nobody. In fact, I might argue they have more brand loyalty than even Apple at this point. If you're making a Tesla product, people want that, right? So Lucid and Rivian have their work cut out for them for that reason. You have to be compelling and different enough and have everything else figured out to be able to compete. So I think it's going to be fierce, but I do think human taste, just the fact that, like, for example, if there was world's best peanut butter, they had one brand at Costco, world's best peanut butter. And then suddenly Ricky's peanut butter shows up. You might buy it because even if you knew this is the world's best peanut butter, just that curiosity of people have to, let's try the second one. Maybe there's something crazy about it that I'll like better. Because even if you say the best, that's a subjective thing. So as long as like your favorite car is subjective, like do you buy a Porsche 911? Do you buy a Aston Martin? They're all good cars. Technically, there's probably one that's faster around the track, but it's subjective. So as long as we have that, I think there will be room for others to succeed.
Okay. So, I mean, then maybe the future of like the end phase might be, let's say, doing the mega packs, right? Competing for cities or grid infrastructure or something like that. But then it's just going to become a price competition. But nobody cares if I've got the Q cells or the sun power panels or whatever. It's just, what's my money savings, and that's it.
Well, so for Enphase though, you have to remember even Tesla's inverter. Do you know? I mean, it sounds like you've been following this pretty closely. What's their warranty?
Oh, the Enphase versus Tesla?
Yeah,
I don't know what Tesla's
so Enphase, there is an engineering advantage that Enphase has, which is because all they're doing is inverting the DC from one panel. They're never getting that hot. Whereas if you have like 20 panels and they're all running down this huge wire to one central inverter, you're inverting like thousands of watts of energy, which means huge high energy, huge heat, and shorter lifetimes. Like the average string inverter lasts 10 years, and Enphase has a 25-year warranty. And honestly, they might last 30 years because of the architecture of how they have that built. So if Tesla has their own inverter, but they're going for like low cost, there might still be buyers that go, you know what, I'd rather have the Enphase because I have shading problems and I don't want to deal with my panels in 10 years or have somebody come out and change this inverter. So
I always thought it was funny, the solar leasing companies, they would always come, they'll knock on your doors, oh, here, sign up for a 20-year contract or whatever. I always thought it was funny. It seemed like they were always using the most inexpensive product that they could that would probably not last more than 10 years. And then after 6 or 7 years, they try to sell it to you to get it off their liability. But so I don't know where Tesla falls in that. I mean, I know they bought Solar City, which used to be one of those.
Right. I think I've heard they use Q cells. I think they have a couple of different vendors that they work with, but they're probably all made in China cells for various reasons and stuff.
The solar roof, I hear people, maybe they replace their concrete tile roofs with the solar roofs. But I mean, for most people who've got like a regular comp shingle roof, I don't think anybody's putting this solar roof on or that isn't just trying to spend money to spend it. How does that even economically make sense? Like, why wouldn't I just lease the panels from Tesla for $50 a month? Why replace my whole roof with something that's 30 grand when I could spend 9 and have a new comp roof,
I think you're right. So they've gone through 3 iterations to get to the point that they are now in terms of being able to market this and commercialize it. I think now they're at the point where it's a luxury product. So I have a concrete tile roof. So it's not as cool as like slate, but it's thick and it'll last like 100 years, right? So I'm not going to get Tesla roof. Yeah. But and even cheaper than that is the asphalt shingle, which is the cheapest way you can go. So there's no way you can compete on price with that. But what Elon says is, you live in Southern California. I live in Southern California. Homes here are expensive. And there are neighborhoods where homes have like slate roofs, which are like this natural stone, and it costs a ton of money. So if you're going for a more premium product, a metal roof, if you're going for a more premium product, and then you want to get solar added to it, now we're cooking with gas. Now it might be competitive. That's the point where Tesla is right now. So you're right. If you live in Kansas and your house costs $108,000, there's no scenario under which you should get Tesla solar roof because your house you won't even get that money back when you sell it. But if you live in Beverly Hills or like La Jolla or something, and your house is worth 1.4 million, and you have the Tesla solar roof, and a future buyer comes and says you have solar, and they can't see it, and it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful product. That could give your home value that much more, especially if there's still wait lists to get it. Right now, it's hard to get.
That's true. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I mean, aside from then that luxury product, I have to say the whole solar leasing thing they're doing, which one of the things they're doing so differently is it used to be the power purchase agreements and the leases. You have to do a 20-year contract on those things, which was horrible for trying to sell real estate. It was toxic. But now Tesla is doing this thing where they're like, oh, you want solar? Here, sign a 2-page lease with us. I've looked at their contracts before. Really simple. You want to cancel? Cancel at any time. We'll just leave the panels there, and we'll switch your contract on or off for whenever you want it. I think this is like a brilliant Trojan horse that honestly Wall Street is blind to. I mean, Tesla Solar is going to be everywhere with these cheap freaking leases, and then people are going to get addicted to, damn, well, that was cool. Let's get a battery because who doesn't need a battery? Why not? Let's do a battery. Well, that was cool. Let's get the car. I don't know.
What's really cool too is they've been working on this software platform called AutoBidder, which think like stock market for electricity. And to your point, even if, let's say, I was a previous customer and I had solar, and they could wire it into their system in such a way, especially in the future, if AutoBidder was approved, where even if I say, you know what, I don't want solar anymore, they go, okay, fine, and they can still generate electricity and sell it to like my utility company with that AutoBidder platform. So.
What's the AutoBidder thing?
So AutoBidder, imagine your favorite brokerage app for trading and buying and selling stock, right? We talked about before how all the kettles in the UK turn on. So what happens is, imagine if my utility is SDG&E. So SDG&E says, hey, we're expecting huge surplus demand. And we start to see like prices per kilowatt of buying electricity. And my house says, don't bother with the cheap stuff. Like, don't sell them for anything less than 50 cents. Let's say there's a situation where we're about to have a blackout and we need electricity so bad that the ask price for electricity goes up to 50 cents. And then my house goes, okay, I'll sell you electricity that I have in my power walls parked for 50 cents kilowatt hour. And I could bank that, and Tesla maybe gets a commission from that, but they would run all that kind of stuff. So we're talking about now is kind of like grid 2.0, or the smart grid, where my utility doesn't care where my power comes from. It doesn't care if it's from a nuclear power plant or from a coal plant. They just buy and sell electricity. They're middlemen. So, so Tesla could have solar on people's roofs, to your point about kind of a Trojan horse. I like that analogy. That's actually perfect. And when AutoBidder comes online and it gets approved and it's allowed to operate and stuff, they could just be buying and selling electricity. And maybe if you own the product, you get a cut of it or something.
So AutoBidder, it's not something that exists right now. It's something that is planned for the future, is what you're saying.
It would require some, just like, anything you plug into your wall outlet has to be UL certified. It has to go through like a regulatory approval probably in different municipalities. But I think the code is actually code complete. I think it all works. It's just a matter of rolling it out in some meaningful way. And it's probably going to happen in California first, either SoCal or NoCal.
If I have like an Enphase battery, can I use this Tesla AutoBidder thing, or am I going to be screwed and locked out of the Tesla ecosystem?
That will determine the road Tesla takes going forward. Are they going to go pure Apple, which is we don't play nice with anybody else, or are they going to open up? We shall see. At this point, I think it could go either way.
That's crazy. Yeah. Oh, wow. Interesting. So, okay. I mean, what a fascinating discussion. I mean, so I want to make this clear regarding Lucid and Tesla. You're just bullish on really the whole industry. It seems like you're skeptical, the Fisker and some of the Faradays, but you're really bullish on energy. Other than energy, is there anything else you're investing in? Any other opportunities you see for disruption?
So we talked about kind of the biotech space, fintech. I think fintech is a really burgeoning market as well. Currently, I'd say I'm very EV heavy in my portfolio, and because I think the next 5 or 10 years are going to be the first time transportation has ever had a disruption since we started, the Model T back a long time ago. So I think there's going to be even more companies than we've talked about today, and charging infrastructure, like battery recycling stuff, right? Redwood materials. There's going to be tons of new investment and opportunities. And the EV will be at the kind of the heart of it. So that is the industry that I'm the most bullish on in the next 5 years. I was actually going to ask you, with all the stock cratering the way they have, I was looking at Bitcoin to see, okay, if Powell comes out and the stock market reacts the way it does, should I be parking my money in Bitcoin? But sadly, Bitcoin has very much reflected the market. So what do you think? Is Bitcoin a good alternative? Because I'm very bullish on Bitcoin as well. For me, it just comes down to, I don't have all the money in the world. So what money I have, do I invest it in companies? Do I go Bitcoin? I've struggled with that. What do you think?
It's so tough because I mean you're so right because I mean Bitcoin, here we are thinking it's an inflation hedge. For sure it's an inflation hedge. Now the market's selling off due to fears of inflation hedge, or rather of inflation coming, and Bitcoin also falls. Bitcoin goes from 57 to 47, 46. I don't know exactly where it is now, but I don't think there's a clear answer for Bitcoin. I do think that Bitcoin just passed a little micro test. I thought that maybe if the market were to sell off, Bitcoin would sell off more rapidly, as people took that as an opportunity to either cover margin or to go buy more stocks. A massive Bitcoin sell-off hasn't actually really happened. So it seems like Bitcoin is just becoming more and more resilient. It's like maybe 3% of my portfolio. So it's small. Yeah, part of me is still skeptical, but the more and more I study Bitcoin, the more and more excited I get about it. But then that opens up the door to, well, if you like Bitcoin, then try Ether, and if you like Ether, try NFTs, and it goes down this rabbit hole of like it's almost like progressing down a line of drugs. You start with one, well, then try this.
I hear you. That's kind of where I'm at too. When Bitcoin spiked in 2018, 2017, and then crashed to $3,000 a coin, I should have just bought a bunch right then and there. I bought a couple, but that was my first test. I was really thinking, is this kind of the end? But Bitcoin itself has just proven to be quite resilient, and I think the price of where it's trading today is a indication of other people's trust. But maybe you're right. Maybe that's the way to think about it. Is it kind of followed the trend, but it didn't go worse. It actually did hold up pretty well. So yeah.
Yeah, and who knows? We don't even know if this crazy period here in the market's over. But yeah, I mean, I have not added to any Bitcoin really since about mid-Feb. The rest is just mostly, I mean, Tesla and some of my other favorite stocks. These are just the ones that I've been plowing money into the last few weeks. It's painful though because it keeps going down, but I like buying the dip, so it's okay with me.
Yeah, as long as you're patient and what does Warren Buffett always say? He says the stock market is the greatest mechanism of transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient, right? As long as you invest in companies you believe in long term and you're patient, it's not so bad. But it does hurt. It weighs on you. I feel like I toss and turn a little bit more at night before I go to bed and stuff compared to like a month ago. But yeah, it is what it is.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's totally like human nature to feel less secure when things are red. It's kind of like I always think of caveman psychology. Like, look, if I'm in my cave and there's a bear and a jaguar, I don't know why, but a bear and a jaguar fighting outside my cave, I'm not going to be sleeping as well because it's like, oh, this is things are a little uncertain, right? That uncertainty creates fear. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, do I just leave this cave and just bail out of here? Because if I go away, then that pain, that uncertainty won't be there. And I think that's where people sell out. It's like, that's it. I'm done. I'll start over. I'll start over at a new cave. It's fine. So totally human nature in my take. And the weird thing is with human nature is, we have a fight or flight response. With stocks, you can't fight. The bear and the jaguar come in, I could fight. I might lose. I could fight. When the candlesticks go red, there's nothing I could do. I can't fight it. It's either you leave or you suck it up. And that hurts. That really hurts.
That's a good point. So that might be why it's hard for us to accept when it does happen.
And so the only option you have is if you want the pain to stop, because you can't fight, you leave. And that's why so many people sell when the market's red.
Yeah. Very good point. Also, I mean, I think generally kind of sucking at investing is not helping me either. Like, for example, when Tesla had their earnings call and they dipped from like 880 to 810, I was like, oh, here's a buying opportunity. So sure. First of all, have more money on the sideline. That way you can buy on dips. But if you're all in, you're all in. A dip does you no good, right? But if you were to be more patient,
it's tough.
Yeah,
It is tough because that it becomes like the debate of like timing the market, and that usually what I look at is just every time I get paid, I go shopping.
Yeah.
If it's down, I'm out selling. I'll just keep buying when I get paid. But yeah, I mean, regularly, I know a lot of people, they keep a lot of cash on the side, and the thinking is, well, I'll wait for the dip. But what's funny is when the people have a lot of cash on the side, those people who are waiting for the dip, they're the same people usually that when the dip comes, they're going, this is just getting started, and they never end up buying anyway.
Right. Right.
So like, I rather you buy at 810 and then pick up some more at 590 or whatever, than sit on cash and go, it's just going to keep going lower, and then it never does, and you're like, oh dang, well I should have invested them, and then I'll just wait for the next one, and you just spend years on the sideline. It's bad.
Yeah. Really, what we need is a time machine. You and I need to get together and build a time machine. It's that easy. I lay in bed every night. Oh man, if I could go back to Friday at 4 p.m. It's that simple. That's it. Like, why?
In the world.
Elon needs to be working on that. Cut the boring tunnel and get to work on this.
Oh, this is amazing. Well, it's been a really fun, incredible conversation here. I want to ask you. We've been going for over a couple hours here now. You got to shout yourself out, man. How do people get in touch with you? How do people learn more about your engineering mindset here, which has been so fascinating to talk to?
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So my channel is Tuba Da Vinci. I think you mentioned you have a link in the description, and the thing is, I'm not full time, unlike most people on YouTube. So that's what kind of makes it tough. But what I'm thinking about doing is doing more of a weekly show where I pick a topic like FSD or maybe CRISPR in the future, and just kind of do a dive. Maybe have guests. Maybe I'll have you on my show. So I'm going to try to find a format that will allow me to make content more frequently, because that's the challenge that I have. I've been on paternity leave for the last 4 months, but I go back to work on Monday. And
congratulations, first of all.
Second boy. Thank you.
Boy or girl?
Boy.
Oh, super fun. First, second?
Second and final.
Second and final. Okay, what do you have? What's your first?
Boy. I have 2 boys. My wife probably is going to get the itch for a daughter in a couple of years, but I'm trying to quell that now as much as we can, and think about the travel we can do. Think about all the.
Yeah, that's our struggle. I mean, Lauren, we have 2 boys, 5 and 3. Lauren desperately wants a girl, and it's so tough, because it's like, well, if you try again naturally, what if you have a third boy? It's like, how many are you gonna have?
And yeah, my younger one is only 10 months old, and they're already starting to fight over toys and stuff. Like, he's walking now. He just started walking last week, and I'm thinking, you really want another one of these monsters in here? Wreaking havoc. But mainly,
I mean, they're so close together. I mean, I don't think it can get any closer. That's really cool. So
three and a half and 10. Yeah, about 3 years apart. 2.5, 2 3/4 years apart.
Oh, sorry. Theirs are 2 3/4. Oh, okay, got it.
3 and 10 months. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I thought you just had one and the other one was 10 months. I'm sorry, I missed.
I work at an awesome software company called Salesforce, and they give you 6 months of paternity leave, which is great. And I took 2 months when I first had him, and I took the second 4-month period at this point later on. Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't clear.
Really quick, when's Salesforce gonna go back up? Because I feel like you guys, had a great run, but you've been flat since September. I feel like you're a great company. In fact, you might know my I've got my brother-in-law. So what would it be called? My brother-in-law's wife works there. And
do you know what team? Truly amazing company. Anybody who's in tech or software, project management, whatever, definitely check out Salesforce. I mean, I can't say enough about it. It's just the most, as far as like a work-friendly, work-life balance company, there's probably no better example of it. I think the acquisition of Slack probably was a big bit to digest. We've had these kind of in the past, so it just is a matter of kind of getting our hands around it, and a couple more good quarters and stuff. But yeah, we're talk about a buying opportunity. I think Salesforce definitely has some upside, and you just got to be patient, I guess, for that acquisition to come through.
So oftentimes employees don't like adding to the company that they work in. Are you adding to Salesforce?
Say it again.
Are you adding stock to Salesforce?
No, I have like, RSUs and ESPPs. I have the typical like engineering package, and that's the only Salesforce stock that I hold.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Wow. Well, this has been a blast. Well, folks, golly, this was so fun. First of all, thank you. Huge
Yeah.
shout out for the time you spent here and all of your insights. Really incredible. So 2-Bit Da Vinci on YouTube. Check out Ricky's channel there. Any final thoughts?
No, I'd love to be back. There's probably 5 or 6 topics you and I could probably think of we can get into. So yeah, I'd love to be back. We'll figure it out and let's keep in touch.
Deal. Awesome. Well, stand by for 1 second. For everyone else, thank you so very much for being here. Appreciate it. If you found this helpful, go ahead and subscribe, share the video, and folks, we'll